Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're venturing deep into the forgotten corners of Texas, places where entire towns have been left behind to rot, where homes sit sunken and broken under heavy skies, and where darkness seems to linger long after the people are gone. These are 20 Texas ghost towns with dark history of abandoned homes, places where doors still creak open at night, lights still burn without power, and something unseen might still be living inside the ruins. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, most spine-tingling stories, the kind only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight is just the beginning. And the terror hidden in these forgotten towns is far from overdone, so where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is about to unfold. Now let's dive into the darkness. There's a stretch of back road between Lubbock and Sweetwater that isn't on any map you'll buy these days. It's old asphalt, cracked and faded, and most folks who still live out that way will tell you they don't drive it anymore. Not. Since the bridges started sinking and the fences started leaning and the trees started growing sideways like they didn't trust the ground to hold them. But even before that, people avoided Clairton. It's not hard to see why. You can tell the moment you catch sight of the place through the dust on your windshield. The roofs sag low like broken backs. The windows gape wide and dark during the pollen day, but at night something strange happens. Upstairs windows glow faint and yellow, even though the power lines were torn down decades ago and the poles stand like blackened teeth against the sky. Folks around here say the houses still remember being lived in. Some say the houses never stopped. I only went there because of a woman. That's usually how these stories start, isn't it? I won't bore you with the details. Just know that when she left, I was the one who stayed behind. I took a job hauling scrap for a salvage company out of Abilene. That's what brought me near Clairton in the first place. Dead towns make for good picking. You learn how to walk careful through places like that, how to watch where the ground buckles and where the air changes and where the shadows don't move quite right. I told myself I wasn't scared. I lied, of course. The first time I drove through Clairton was by accident. I'd taken a wrong turn chasing daylight, trying to beat a storm that looked mean as hell crawling over the horizon. My radio cut out around the same time my phone lost signal. That's how these places get you. They peel you away from the world piece by piece until you're alone with the dust and the wind. And whatever's waiting beneath the floors. Clairton didn't announce itself. One minute I was driving past dead fields and sun-bleached barns. And the next I realized I hadn't seen another car in over an hour and the houses along the road were watching me. That's what it felt like anyway. Watching. Slouched behind curtains that hadn't moved in 40 years, windows smeared thick with grime, doors leaning half open like mouths waiting to speak. The first house had lights on upstairs. I thought maybe squatters, maybe someone like me got lost and never found their way back. But then the next house did too. And the one after that. All yellow lights, soft and flickering, not like bulbs exactly but lanterns or candles burning. Low behind lace curtains, no shadows moving behind them. No movement at all, in fact, just stillness, heavy and old. Like the town had been holding its breath a long time and didn't trust itself to exhale yet. I told myself to keep driving. My gut had already started whispering that something wasn't right here, that maybe the storm behind me wasn't the worst thing waiting on this road. But then I saw the sign. Faded wood, half eaten by termites, nailed crook to a fence post. Clairton in peeling black letters. Beneath it, another sign hung by one rusted chain. Population 0. I should have turned around. I didn't. I don't. Know why? Maybe because I couldn't believe a place like this still existed. Maybe because the part of me that had already lost too much wanted to see how far gone something could really get. Or maybe because by then it was already too late. I pulled over at what used to be a gas station, judging by the skeleton of a pump and the sagging awning above it. The store itself was boarded up, but something about the boards made me uneasy. Not the way they hung loose or how the nails looked bent, but the way the boards bowed outward like something inside had been pressing against them. Slow and steady over the years, the wind picked up as I stepped out of the truck, carrying with it a smell I couldn't quite place. Not rot, exactly. Not just dust. Something older. Something like whetstone and dry bones and soil churned from. Beneath things that should have stayed buried, I told myself to check one house and go. Just one. Proof for my boss that I'd scouted the place. I picked the nearest, a 2-story with shutters hanging like broken wings and siding peeled back to show the bones beneath. The door opened when I touched it, soft as breath. Inside it smelled like abandonment. The air thick with mildew and silence. Furniture still in place beneath sheets gone gray with time. A staircase climbing into darkness. And up there, faint and steady, the glow of light behind a closed door. I should have left. I should have run. Instead, I told myself maybe a vagrant had holed up here. Maybe I'd find someone worse off than me. That's the kind of kindness that gets you killed in places like this. The stairs groaned beneath me. The air got colder, thicker. The door at the end of the hall wasn't locked. I pushed it open and found a room perfectly preserved in the moment whoever lived there last had left. A bed with sheets turned down, a lamp glowing soft on the knitstand, and sitting beside it, an old photograph in a tarnished frame. A family, father, mother, 2 kids, all smiling, all familiar. My throat closed up when I realized why it was my family. Not exactly, but close enough. My father's scowl behind wire glasses, my mother's tired smile, my sister's gap-toothed grin, and me, or someone who could have been me, younger and thinner and wearing the same damn jacket I'd worn in a photo buried. Somewhere back home, I didn't pick up the frame. I didn't touch a thing. I backed out slow, pulled the door shut behind me, and listened. For a long time there was nothing but the hum of that lamp. Then footsteps, soft, steady, climbing the stairs below. I didn't wait to see who or what was coming. I ran. Through the hall, down the stairs that screamed beneath my weight, out into air that smelled now unmistakably of earth opened too wide. The town watched me go. I felt it in the windows and the doors, in the lights still burning upstairs in every house I passed. My truck started on the first try. It shouldn't have. I didn't stop driving until the sun burned the sky raw and the radio sputtered back to life and the road beneath me remembered how to carry me somewhere else. I don't go near Clareton anymore. I don't look for it on maps. I don't take back roads after dark. But sometimes, when I pass through certain stretches of Texas where the land buckles strange beneath the wheels and the sky hangs too close, I see a glow on the horizon, faint, yellow, steady dot like a town still waiting, like lights left burning for someone who never quite made it home. Dry Hollow isn't on most maps anymore, and that's probably for the best. Just a smear of cracked earth and rusted fence posts out near the Texas-New Mexico border where the land turns ugly and the sky forgets how to rain. Folks stopped calling. In a town sometime in the 80s, after the last grocery store burned down and no one bothered to rebuild. Now it's nothing but an old cattle road that leads to a few falling-in houses, a hollowed-out church, and a windmill that doesn't spin anymore. They say it was the drought that killed it. Years and years without proper rain, each summer hotter and crueler than the last, until even the weeds gave up and the cattle dropped dead where they stood. The Pecos River dried to a trickle of mud, the wells went dry, and the ranchers packed up what little they had left and moved east toward greener pastures. Those who stayed either didn't have the means or didn't have the sense, depending on who you asked. Marlene Tibbetts was one of the last. She lived out on the edge of town in a squat little house that looked like it had been hammered together from scrap wood and tin siding. People said she used to be pretty once, back when Dry Hollow still had dances and barbecues and 4th of July fireworks. But by the end her skin looked like old parchment and her hair hung in strings down her back like gray moss off a dying tree. She ran a kind of junk shop out of her front room, selling tools and boots and rusted bits of machinery to the odd trucker or lost hunter that wandered through. Mostly she sat on her porch and smoked, watching the horizon like she was waiting for something to come crawling out of it. Marlene was the one who told me about the doors. I'd stopped for gas out in Pecos and heard an old boy at the counter mention Dry Hollow in passing. Something about a coyote problem. My dad used to tell stories about the place back when he'd haul cattle down that way. Said it gave him the creeps even before it turned into a ghost town. I was between jobs, driving aimlessly west with nothing better to do. So I figured, why not see it for myself? Curiosity. Boredom? Something deeper maybe, though I couldn't have told you what. I found Marlene on her porch, sipping something brown out of a mason jar. She looked me over like she was trying to place whether I was real or just heat mirage, then waved me up with a nicotine-yellowed hand. "You looking for parts or stories?" she asked. I said stories. That made her laugh, a dry little sound like leaves scraping asphalt. She told me about the drought, the cattle, the wells gone sour. About the church burning down with the preacher still locked inside. About the night sky cracking open like an egg and spitting down lightning that said half-half. The north pasture ablaze. All of it told in the flat, matter-of-fact tone of someone describing weather or crop prices. Nothing supernatural. Nothing that couldn't be explained by bad luck and bad land. Then she told me about the doors. Not at first. At first, she skirted around it, talking about how things sound different in the heat, how wood warps and groans, how wind finds its way into the smallest cracks and makes them sigh like old women in church, how empty houses settle in the night, stretching and shifting like bones remembering how to ache. But then she leaned in close, breath sour and eyes sharp as fence staples, and said, "That ain't what you hear in Dry Hollow. Not really. What you hear is doors opening. Doors that shouldn't open. Doors locked up tight for years, opening slow like somebody's come home late, somebody who forgot they died already." She told me she heard it first after her husband passed. Middle of the night, hottest part of July, how so quiet she could hear the blood ticking in her ears. Front door creaked open slow, hinges whining like a dog begging. Nobody there. Nobody. Walking up the drive. Just that door swinging wide like it was welcoming something in. She started locking it after that. Bolting it. Nailing a board across it for good measure. Didn't help. Some nights it opened anyway. Some nights it wasn't the front door but the bedroom or the back shed. Or the cellar she hadn't been down in since before the well dried up. "I think it's the land calling them back," she said. "The ones that died here. The ones that never left proper. They ain't got nowhere else to go, so they come home. Trouble is, they don't always know they're dead. Still looking for supper, still looking for someone to listen, still looking for something to hate." She said she wasn't scared of them, not anymore. You live with something long enough, it stops being frightening and starts being just another part of life. Like dust. Like thirst. I stayed the night parked on the edge of town, windows down, sweat pooling under my neck as the dark settled in thick and heavy. Heat like a blanket over the world. I told myself I'd hear nothing but wind and the groan of old wood. That Marlene's stories were just the ramblings of a woman too long alone. Around midnight, I heard the first door open. It wasn't close. Maybe 2 houses down. A slow creak, unmistakable in the stillness. Like someone easing in from the heat, trying not to wake whoever was waiting in the dark. Then another. Closer this time. Then another. I sat up, heart thudding, watching the empty shells of houses around me. No lights, no shapes moving. Just door after door, slow and deliberate, opening onto rooms no one lived in anymore. Somewhere down the road, something laughed. Not loud, not human. Dry and cracked, like wind pushing through a throat full of sand. I didn't sleep. Didn't move. Just waited for dawn and the illusion of safety it might bring. When I drove out, Marlene was already on her porch, smoke curling up around her like a shroud. "You heard him, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "You best keep driving," she said. "Don't come back. Place like this remembers you. Place like this don't let go easy." She wasn't wrong. Weeks later, holed up in a motel 3 towns over, I started hearing doors creak open in the night. First the bathroom, then the closet, then the door to the hall. Even though I'd latched it. No footsteps, no shapes, just the sound of someone coming home, like they followed me, like they're still following, like they're waiting for me to forget they're there. Or worse, waiting for me to understand I never really left Dry Hollow at all. There's a stretch of highway out past Abilene where the land goes flat and mean and seems to peel away from the horizon like old wallpaper. Folks don't drive it unless they have to. Something about the way the sky hangs too low over the fields. Out there, the way the wind doesn't sound quite right when it claws through the mesquite. You take Highway 380 far enough west, you'll come across a rusted sign half sunk in weeds. The paint flaking so bad you'd miss it if you weren't looking. It says Morrow's Crossing in letters just big enough to remind you something used to be there. It ain't on maps anymore. Hasn't been for decades. Used to be a railroad town back when that mattered. Not a big place, a string of shotgun shacks leaning into each other like old drunks, a church with peeling clapboard siding, a water tower that lists to one side like it's too tired to stand. Maybe 100 people, maybe less. The kind of place you'd blink through on your way to somewhere that still had a reason to exist. Except nobody lives there now. That's the story anyway. Place dried up after the tracks pulled out in '72. Folks packed what they could fit in pickups or left it to rot. No jobs, no school, no future. Just tumbleweeds and silence, except the houses never seemed to rot quite right. I heard about it from a buddy of mine who runs a repo outfit out of Sweetwater. He said he got sent out that way once to haul off an old Chevy pickup. Title traced back to an address in Morrow's Crossing, and nobody had paid registration in 15 years. Probably a junk title scam, he figured, but he went out anyway. Said it was the damnedest thing. The houses, sure. The wood's gone gray and the porches sag, but look inside any window, and it's like someone still lives there. Furniture polished, curtains clean, coffee cups in the drainer, beds made. No dust, no cobwebs, no sign of weather getting in. Like the minute you turn your back, someone's setting things straight again. He didn't stay long. Saw it, he heard the church bell ring, even though the tower's half collapsed and there's no rope. Midnight dead on. Clear as a funeral toll. I didn't believe him, of course. Ghost stories. Every county's got one. But it stuck with me. Ate at me a little, the way things do when they brush up against something too big for sense. So I went out there myself last month. Call it boredom. Call it curiosity. Call it that mean little streak in me that can't leave well enough alone. It was worse than he said. I drove out late, Figuring if there was anything to the bell story, I wanted to hear it for myself. Moon high, air like warm breath. Found bay. Sign, found the turnoff, more a path of ruts than a road now. The town unfolded ahead of me like a mouth opening slow. Houses lined up neat as teeth. Sagging, empty, windows black. But the yards, grass short, weeds trimmed. Fresh paint on picket fences where whole boards leaned rotted away. That was the first itch between my shoulder blades. That kind of upkeep don't happen on its own. I parked in front of what must have been the general store once. Windows boarded. Sign half hanging. But through the cracks, I saw shelves stocked full. Cans lined up like little soldiers. No dust, no spider webs. I walked the street. My boots sounded loud. Too loud. No crickets. No wind. Just me breathing and something heavy watching. That's how it felt. Like eyes behind curtains, except the curtains never moved. Peered through house windows. Same story. Tables set. Lamps. Lit. Not bright, but enough to see. Faint yellow glow like someone left just a bulb burning for when they got home. Problem was, nobody ever came home. I tried doors. Locked. Every one. I knocked once. Not sure why. Habit, maybe. Nothing answered. But across the street, I saw a curtain twitch just the same. I didn't go in the houses. Not then. The church sat at the far end, steeple crooked, bell tower empty. Doors wide open. Yawning dark. Inside smelled like rain on stone, not rot, not mildew, just clean and cold and wrong. Pews lined up straight. Hymnals neat in racks. Candles burned on the altar, little flames steady as breath. No footprints in the dustless floor. Sat in a pew. Don't ask me why. Maybe to feel less alone. Maybe to feel watched proper instead of just guessed at from corners. Midnight came, and sure as hell, that bell rang. Loud, clear. Impossible. I didn't run. Not yet. I told myself I was here too. See, so I'd see. The sound died out, and for a minute nothing moved. Then the pew behind me creaked. Not from settling wood. From weight. From something sitting down just out of reach of my sight. I stood up slow. Turned. Nobody there. Except now. The hymnals were open. Every one. Same page. Something handwritten in margins. Same scrawl. Same ink. Over and over. Stay clean. Stay. Inside. Stay quiet. I left. Walked slow, like not to disturb the air. Back past houses where lights burned behind curtains that hadn't twitched before. Back past porches where rockers rocked slow and no wind at all. When I reached my truck, I saw footprints behind me in the dust. Not mine. Barefoot. Small. Too many. I started the engine. Headlights caught a shape in the rear view. Man-shaped. Woman-shaped? Hard to tell. Standing in the church doorway, watching. Pale. Still. When I turned to look proper, it wasn't there. I don't know what Morrow's Crossing is. Not anymore. Maybe never did. Folks there. If they're there, they ain't living the way you and I understand. But I do know this. That town keeps itself up like it's waiting for something. Or someone. Maybe it's been waiting a long time. Maybe it doesn't care who fills the rooms, so long as they stay clean, stay inside, stay quiet. I still drive Highway 380 sometimes, but I don't look for the sign anymore. I don't stop for gas between Abilene and Lubbock. And some nights, around midnight, I hear a bell ring way out where there shouldn't be one, and I wonder how long it's going to take before the clean little rooms in Morrow's Crossing come looking for someone new to keep them company. They still talk about Greer's Mill and the small towns scattered across East Texas, though most of the ones who talk weren't even born when it happened. You'll hear the story in diner booths, in bait shops, around fire pits late at night. when the beer's running low and the woods start feeling too close. Everyone adds their own bit to it now, Satanists, aliens, witches, government man, but the bones of it never change. An entire family disappeared from inside a locked house. Vanished. Left their dinner half-eaten on the table. Left the lights on. Left the doors bolted. Back then, Greer's Mill was one of those leftover places. Built around a sawmill, clinging to life the way a stray dog clings to roadkill. A few hundred people, most of them born there, most of them stuck there. The mill paid just enough to keep folks too tired to dream of leaving. Rows of tired houses sinking into the red dirt, a single gas station, a Baptist church, and the mill itself crouching like a tumor at the edge of the pine woods. The Randall family lived on the south side of town, in a squat, ugly house at the end of a gravel road that led nowhere else. Tommy Randall worked nights at the mill, ran the debarker machine. His wife June kept to herself mostly, took the kids to church on Sundays, waved politely when she had to. 2 kids, boy and girl, quiet, good grades. The last anyone saw of them was a Wednesday, mid-August, heavy with heat. Tommy bought a 6-pack. From the gas station on his way to work, June picked up a bag of chicken feed from the co-op. The kids rode their bikes up and down the dusty stretch of road like always. Normal. Boring. Forgettable. Thursday morning. Tommy didn't show up to relieve the night shift. His supervisor, a man named Clovis Tate, drove out to the house figuring Tommy might have been drinking and overslept. Clovis found the place locked up tight. Car in the drive. Bikes leaning by the porch. Lights on inside, even though it was full daylight. He knocked. No answer. He walked around, peered through windows. That's when he saw the table. Plate set. Glasses half full of tea. Forks and knives arranged like someone was halfway through their supper and just stopped. No signs of a struggle. No blood, nothing broken. He called the sheriff. They forced the door. Inside it felt wrong. That's what every man who went in said afterward. Not scary, not exactly. Just wrong. Like the air was too still. Like time had been paused, but the house hadn't gotten the message. Refrigerator humming. Fan turning lazy circles overhead. Food starting to go bad on the stove. A chicken in the backyard, pecking at dirt like nothing had changed. The Randalls were gone. Not just gone from the house. Gone from the world. Clothes in the closets. Toothbrushes in the bathroom. June's purse on the counter with her keys beside it. No sign they'd packed a thing. No sign they'd left of their own choice. The doors were locked from the inside. Windows latched. No footprints in the dust except the ones from the sheriff and his men. Search parties scoured the woods for days. Dogs brought in from 3 counties picked up a scent that circled the house twice and ended at the back door. Nowhere else to go. They drained ponds, questioned neighbors, dug up half the county on rumor alone. Nothing. It made the news for a week. Reporters came, stood in front of the house, repeated the same baffled phrases. Small town mystery. Vanished without a trace. Devil's work. Then the mill shut down. Just like that. Some paperwork deal, some big company swallowing another. Folks moved off, one by one. Houses emptied, stores closed. Greer's Mill faded. Left to rot back into the woods. But the Randall house. It's still there, peeling paint, boards sagging. Grass grown up tall enough to swallow the porch. But the door's still locked. The lights still work somehow. Nobody's been paying a bill, but flick that switch and the bulbs glow pale and steady like they've been waiting. And inside, the table's still set. Plates with a gray crust of long-rotted food. Glasses cloudy with age. Silverware where it fell from nerveless fingers. Chairs half pulled back like someone meant to stand and never did. They say if you listen real close, you can hear the hum of the fridge even now. Nobody stays long in Greer's Mill anymore. The teenagers still dare each other to go up there at night, to peek through the dusty windows, to knock on the locked door and wait. They say sometimes it knocks back. There was a boy last year, wandered too close. Sighed, he heard voices inside. A man, a woman, 2 kids, arguing low and tense like a family in the middle of a bad night. The boy said he ran when the porch light came on by itself, and when he looked back from the road, he swore he saw 4 shapes at the window, watching him go. Sometimes people get curious. Sometimes they break in. They always regret it. There was a woman, a photographer from Houston, took pictures of ghost towns, abandoned places. Spent a night there with her camera. Her husband found her 2 days later wandering barefoot down Highway 21, clothes torn, fingernails caked with dirt. She couldn't speak for months after. Still won't say what she saw. But she draws things now. Houses with locked doors. Tables. Waiting for dinners that never come. Shadows behind glass. The sheriff's office keeps the key locked away. Claims it's for liability, for safety. But the truth is, nobody wants to be the one holding it too long. Bad dreams come fast when you've been inside. Nightmares where you're sitting at that table, fork halfway to your mouth, and someone behind you is breathing slow and wet against your ear. There's talk about tearing the place down. Developers sniffing around, thinking they might turn Greer's Mill into some rustic little tourist spot. But they can't seem to get the paperwork right. Files go missing. Phones cut out. Surveyors refuse to go past the old road. The last man who tried to bulldoze it spent 3 weeks in a hospital afterward, eyes wide open, screaming about hands pulling him down through the floor. They let him out eventually, but he won't live. Within 100 miles of those woods now, folks figure it's best left alone. Let the woods take it, let the vines cover it, let time swallow it whole. But deep down, they know better. Some houses don't rot away. Some houses wait, and the Randall place is still waiting, lights on, table set, waiting for someone to come home. There's a stretch of Texas dirt off Highway 82 that doesn't show up on maps anymore. Not the real ones, not the tourist ones, not even the satellite ones. It's just a smear of brown and gray between the hills, a place where the road buckles and dips like it's trying to spit you out. Folks passing through might notice the way the grass changes there, how it goes brittle and yellow no matter the season, how it seems to lean away from the road like it's afraid of something buried beneath it. They might wonder about it for a minute, maybe even mention it over coffee at a gas station an hour later, but they don't turn back. No one turns back. Not since Benson Flats went under. It wasn't a big town. Never had more than a few hundred people, and most of those were tied to the old zinc mine that ran like a rotted tooth beneath the hills. A company town, built cheap and fast back in the 30s, back when no one asked too many questions about labor rights or groundwater or what might be living in the deep dark of the earth. The mine shut down in '84 after a collapse killed 17 men, and the company packed up overnight like it had never been there at all. Left behind the houses, though. Left behind the people. Left behind something else too, though no one knew it at the time. Not for sure. Not until the ground started opening up. The first house to go belonged to a family named Carver. Husband, wife, 2 little boys. They were sitting down to dinner one night when the floor buckled beneath them, just folded in like wet cardboard. Neighbors said they heard screaming, but by the time they got there, the house was already halfway gone. Not broken, not collapse gone. Sinking into a hole that hadn't been there a minute before, a hole that shouldn't have been possible. No quake, no storm, just earth swallowing timber and brick and bone. Like it was hungry. Sheriff drove out with a crew the next morning. Roped the area off, called in the state geologist from Amarillo. Official story was subsidence from the old mine shafts, unstable ground, tragic accident. They put up signs. Keep out, danger, unstable terrain. But within a month, another house went under. Then another, each time the same. No warning. No cracks in the drywall or sagging foundation. Just solid ground turning liquid beneath people's feet, pulling them under like quicksand, only slower. More deliberate. Like something was reaching up from below, taking its time. The survivors packed up fast after that. Not everyone. Some folks are too poor or too stubborn or too tied to the dirt their granddaddies are buried in to leave. But enough. Enough to leave Benson Flats half empty, streets lined with boarded windows and sagging porches, and that feeling you get sometimes in old places, where the silence hums if you listen too close. The holes kept coming, slow but steady, swallowing what was left house by house. Always houses, never barns or sheds or the rusted-out shells of cars littering the yards. Always homes. Places where people had lived, laughed, fought, died. Places. Thick with memory. By 93. The sheriff's office stopped responding to calls from Benson Flats. Power lines went down and didn't get fixed. Water stopped running. The postman stopped delivering. It wasn't official. There's no paperwork that says the town was abandoned, no government decree, but everyone understood. Benson Flats was done. Whatever lived beneath it had won. I went out there once, years later. Foolish curiosity, the kind that comes after too many beers and too many stories told by men who don't know when to shut up. I'd heard the tales, same as anyone who grew up within spitting distance. About the holes that bled black mud even. In drought, about the lights flickering in empty windows, about the voices that came up through the cracks at night if you pressed your ear to the floor. About how the earth didn't just open at random, it picked its victims, listened to them, waited until they were alone, until they were soft with sleep or drink or fear. I didn't believe it, not then, not really. But I wanted to see. I parked on the shoulder where the road gives up, pretending to be straight, and started walking. The town wasn't hard to find. The sign still stood at the edge, rusted through in places but legible. Welcome to Benson Flats, a proud mining community. Proud or not, the place looked like hell. Houses slumped against each other like drunks. Yards swallowed by thorn and weed. Streets cracked and heaved like old scars. The sky felt wrong overhead, too big and too empty. The sun dim behind clouds. That didn't move. No birds, no wind. Just heat and dust and silence. I found the Carver place without meaning to. The hole was still there, bigger now, rimmed with crumbling asphalt and dead grass. Not deep, maybe 15 feet, but dark as pitch at the bottom. Staring into it made my head hurt, like my brain was trying to turn itself inside out. I thought I heard something down there, a rustling, a whispering, but it could have been my own blood pounding in my ears. I told myself that. Kept telling myself that as I walked on, past houses leaning into emptiness, past doors hanging open like mouths caught mid-scream. One house still stood straight. Lights on in the windows, faint, but steady. A porch light burning yellow against the gray. Against all sense, I went to it. Knocked on the door because it felt like the kind of place where knocking mattered. It opened before I could take my hand away. Old woman stood there, hair white and thin as smoke, eyes the color of wet clay. She looked at me like she'd been expecting me, like she knew me. She smiled, small and sad, and said, "You shouldn't have come." Not now. I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer. Just stepped aside, waved me in like a hostess tired of company, but too polite to turn them away. The house smelled of earth and mildew and something older, something sweet and rotting. Beneath the floorboards. I sat because standing felt wrong somehow, like I was drawing attention, like something beneath us might notice. They don't like visitors, she said after a while. Not anymore. Not since they learned how lonely we can be. I asked her who they were. She laughed, not kindly. Same ones who took the houses. Same ones who hollowed out the ground beneath our beds and filled it with teeth. You think the mine collapsed because of bad engineering? Think again. Think deeper. She told me about the miners who dug too far, broke through into something that wasn't rock, wasn't earth, wasn't meant to be touched. How they came back changed, eyes wide and skin pale and trembling like wires under tension. How they whispered of tunnels that moved, of walls that breathed, of voices in the dark, calling them home. How one by one they vanished, pulled back down into the holes they'd made. She told me how the town learned to live with it, how sacrifices were made, how some families prospered while others disappeared, how the ground took only what it was. Owed, but the balance broke when the mine closed. No more offerings, no more blood. Just hunger. They're still hungry, she said. They watch from underneath, feeling for footsteps, listening for hearts. You shouldn't have come. They know you now. I left, fast as I could without breaking into a run, because running felt like begging to be chased. The sun was lower when I stepped outside, though I hadn't been inside. Long shadows stretched wrong across the cracked street. I didn't look back, not until I reached my truck. The lights were off now. The house was gone, just gone. Nothing but a fresh hole in the earth where it had stood, neat and round, and waiting. I drove until the road turned smooth again, until the grass looked green and the sky looked honest. I don't tell this story often. Folks don't believe it, and I can't blame them. If I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't either. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of that town, of those holes, of the way the earth felt soft beneath my feet, like it wanted me. And sometimes, when I wake, I swear I hear something shifting beneath my house, something waiting, something learning how lonely I can be. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you already knew where to look. One of those little Texas towns the highway forgot about somewhere back in the 70s. The road signs had been pulled down or rusted through long ago, leaving nothing to point the way but memory and rumor, and even those were starting to fray at the edges. The maps don't show Elridge anymore. Maybe they never really did. But it's still there, quiet as a grave and twice as stubborn, tucked between a dying creek and a stretch of woods, so thick and tangled it feels like stepping into another world. The houses are all still standing, for the most part. Weather-beaten, sagging, choked with vines and kudzu, but standing. Some with curtains still in the windows. Some with toys left on porches, plastic faded brittle in the sun. Lawnmowers half swallowed by tall grass. Cars gone to rust in driveways. Like the people just got up one morning and walked away. Or like they meant to come back but never did. That's what they say. Anyhow, but what really happened in Elridge? Well, it starts with the children. They were ordinary enough once. 37 of them, give or take, if you believe the newspaper clippings that still turn up from time to time. Not all from town proper, some from outlying farms, cousins visiting. For the summer, that kind of thing. The kind of children who rode bikes with no helmets, who swam in creeks thick with snakes, who knew every dip and hollow in the woods by heart. Until one night they walked into those woods and never came back. Out. It wasn't all at once. Not in the way stories like this usually go. No one big disappearance. No single mass exodus. It was piecemeal, over weeks, maybe months. A kid wouldn't come home from playing. Another wouldn't show up at school. A few vanished on a dare, following old deer trails deeper than they should have gone. The sheriff at the time, a man named Luke Bearden, told reporters it was just bad luck piling up. Runaways, accidents, maybe even an animal attack or two. Nothing more sinister than that. But Bearden stopped talking to reporters after his own boy vanished. They found the sheriff's car parked at the edge of the woods. Door open, keys in the ignition, radio still squawking static. They never found him, or his son. After that, folks packed up fast. Those who could afford to leave did. Those who couldn't, well, they left anyway. Some said they heard things at night, voices calling from the tree line, laughter under their windows long after midnight, footsteps in empty hallways. One woman wrote in a letter to her sister that she'd seen her daughter standing at the edge of the cornfield, holding hands with something too tall, too thin, too pale to be any kind of person. The letter was found pinned to her door with a kitchen knife. No one ever found her either. The woods swallowed Elridge whole after that. Or maybe Elridge sank into the woods. Hard to say. By the time I went looking for it, decades later, there weren't many left who even remembered the town. A few old-timers at a gas station pointed me in the right direction with a kind of wary pity, like maybe I was too dumb to know better or too stubborn to listen. You don't want to go poking around there. One of them warned, squinting at me over the rim of his coffee cup. Ain't nothing left worth seeing. Ain't nothing left but the woods. But I went anyway. Found the road easy enough once I knew where to look. Cracked blacktop strangled by weeds, lined with fences half fallen and choked in honeysuckle. Birds didn't sing there. Not even the wind made much noise. And then, there it was. Elridge. Just like the story said. Houses still standing. Storefronts with mannequins collapsed behind dusty glass. A gas station sign frozen forever at prices too cheap to believe. The schoolhouse door hung open, swaying slow on rusted hinges. A swing set out back creak, though there was no breeze. It felt expectant. Like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting. And everywhere, signs of those who left in a hurry. Plates on tables, clothes still on lines. Bibles open on knitstands. But no people. Not a single one. I walked the streets for hours, waiting for something to happen. For someone to step out onto a porch and ask what the hell I was doing there. For a car to come creeping down the lane. For a dog to bark. Anything. But nothing did. Until I reached the edge of the woods. It was the trees that stopped me. They weren't right. Too tall. Too close together. Bark like old bone, leaves like skin. No undergrowth. No birds. Just a path. Worn smooth as if by countless small feet. And there, standing just within the shadow of those trees, something waited. Children. Dozens of them. Pale and still. Eyes black as holes. Hands held loose at their sides like dolls left too long in the sun. They watched me with those empty eyes, smiled with mouths too wide, too full of teeth, and behind them, deeper in the dark, something else smiled too. Something bigger. Older. Hungrier. It wore the woods like a cloak and the children like a crown. And when it stepped forward, the trees bent to make way. I didn't run. Couldn single quotes T. Just stood there, hard hammering, breath caught somewhere between scream and prayer. One of the children stepped closer. A girl, barefoot, hair tangled with leaves, dress hanging in tatters. She reached out, took my hand. Cold as stone. Come play with us, she said, and her voice wasn't a child's at all. Behind her, the others laughed, and behind them, the woods breath deep and slow, like a thing dreaming. I don't remember leaving. Don't remember the drive back. Sometimes. I think I never really did. Sometimes I still hear them. Just outside my window when the night's too quiet and the world feels too thin. Laughter in the trees. Footsteps on the stairs. A voice, soft and sweet and wrong, whispering, "Come play. Come play. Come play." And sometimes, when I look out into the dark, I see them waiting still. Smiling. Closer than before. Newton's Bend used to be the kind of place you'd forget about as soon as you'd driven past it. A handful of streets curled like an old man's fist around a muddy stretch of the Trinity River, sagging houses with their paint worn down to gray, chain-link fences that had long ago given up trying to stand straight. Folks who lived there either didn't have the money to leave or didn't have anywhere else to go. They fished the river when they could, drank when they couldn't, and filled the long Texas nights with talk about things they ought to have buried deeper than they did. Nobody ever came looking for Newton's Bend unless they were lost or running from something worse. And then the flood came, and even the mapmakers stopped pretending the town existed. It wasn't just a flood. Not in the usual sense. This wasn't. Rain beating down for days or some bloated river spilling its banks in a tantrum. It came fast, like something angry crawling up from underneath the earth. The old-timers said they'd never seen water move like that, all black and slick, and carrying with it things no river had any business carrying. Not branches or trash or dead fish. Things with faces, they whispered. Things with too many hands or mouths that hung open like wounds. The Bend went under in a matter of hours. They found some bodies washed miles downstream, skin peeled raw, like something boiled alive. Others they never found at all. But the strangest part, the part people still don't like to talk about even now, wasn't the bodies or the flood itself. It was what got left behind. The houses. Every last one of them still standing, long after the water should have carried them off or rotted them down to their nails. They sat there, waterlogged and leaning, their windows dark and gaping like sockets without eyes. No one went back to claim them. No one moved in to pick over what might have been left behind. Over time, the land dried out, though the ground stayed soft and sour underfoot, like something underneath still hadn't let go. The weeds came back, and with them the mildew and the rot, creeping up the boards like a slow infection. I came through Newton's Bend by accident one August, chasing a story that wasn't supposed to lead anywhere near there. Freelance work for a magazine that liked pieces about forgotten places and the weird history behind them. Ghost towns, cult ruins, half-burned sanitariums, Newton's Bend should have been right in the wheelhouse. Only thing was, I hadn't heard of it until I missed a turn south of Huntsville and found myself rattling down a cracked asphalt road with no signs and too much sky pressing down. I figured I'd find a way to turn around soon enough, but then the trees opened up and there it was, spread out like a stain across the land. From the road, it looked dead. Roofs caved in on themselves, porches sagging under the weight of their O'Near's, doors swinging open to nothing but dark. But the strangest thing was how it all seemed placed, like no storm had ever touched it, like no flood had dragged at the bones of the place. The houses sat in neat little rows, untouched, except by time and whatever the water had left behind in its wake. I parked the car on the edge of what might have once been Main Street and stepped out into air thick with heat and the stink of old mold. I didn't plan to stay long. Snap a few pictures, take a few notes, maybe dig up a name or two to chase. Down later at the county office. The first house I stepped into had a front porch soft as a sponge and a door that groaned like something waking up. Inside, it smelled of wet rot and old wallpaper curling away from the bones beneath. Furniture still sat where it had been left, couch collapsed under mildew, TV screen shattered in its frame, a coffee table fuzzy with green bloom. A photograph lay face down on the floor. I picked it up without thinking. A family smiling in that stiff way people used to smile for cameras. Mother, father, 2 boys in matching shirts. Behind them, the house I stood in, though in the photo it still had curtains in the windows and grass that wasn't drowned brown. I put the photo back and moved on. House after house, the story stayed the same. Lives abandoned mid-step. Plates still on tables, beds still unmade, shoes lined up by doors. A town peeled open and hollowed out, but not empty. Not really. In every room, I felt it watching me. Not a ghost, not in the way people mean when they say it. Not some shape drifting through walls or rattling chains for attention. This was quieter, deeper. Like the house itself had lungs somewhere beneath the floorboards, slow and wet and breathing by the time the sun started going down. I'd made it halfway through the town and realized I hadn't heard a single bird or insect since I got there. Just my own footsteps and the whisper of wind dragging through empty rooms. That's when I heard the floor talking. At least, that's how it sounded. A slow, wet murmur rising up from the boards under my feet. Not words, not exactly, but something. That wanted to be. I froze, listening, and felt the boards twitch like something shifting in its sleep. Then a noise from the next room, a soft knock like fingers tapping at wood. I should have left then. I knew that. But curiosities, a sickness you don't get over easy. I pushed the door open, half expecting nothing at all. The room was empty except for a dark stain on the far wall. Something too deep to be water damage, spreading in tendrils across the peeling wallpaper. It pulsed, slow as breath, and from it came that noise again, knock, 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 only now it sounded more like bone on wood. Behind me, the door creaked shut on its own. The air thickened, heavy with mildew and something sharper underneath, like rust or meat gone bad. I stepped back, hand fumbling for the knob, and felt the floor give beneath my heel. Not break, not splinter. Give, like skin pulling loose. I looked down and saw something slick and black pushing up between the cracks, curling slow as fingers. Reaching for warmth, I yanked the door open and ran. Out of the house, down the street, past windows that flickered with something moving behind them, something too tall, too thin, bending in ways bodies shouldn't bend. They watched from behind. Broken glass, from gaps in door frames, from the swollen bellies of waterlogged walls. I could feel them pressing against the skin of the world, trying to bleed through. By the time I reached my car, the sun was gone and the dark had settled in thick as oil. The town behind me seemed to sigh, a long wet breath sinking back into silence. I didn't tell the magazine about Newton's Bend. Didn't tell anyone, not really. What would I say? That a drowned town had tried to pull me under too? That its bones weren't empty? Not anymore? I thought about burning the film, deleting the files, but curiosity's a sickness and I'm sicker than most. Some nights I still go back through the photos. In every shot, behind every doorway or window, there's something watching. Faces that weren't there when I took them. Faces that weren't ever people at all. And if I listen long enough, late enough, when the house is quiet and the dark presses in, I can hear them whispering under my own floorboards. Waiting for the next flood. Waiting for the world to forget them again. Waiting for someone else to listen. There's a stretch of country west of Wichita Falls, out where the land flattens into bone and sky, and even the wind sounds tired of itself. And if you ask around about Parker's Hollow, most folks will tell you there's nothing out there but jackrabbits and rust. They're half right. The other half is something worse. Something people stopped putting words to a long time ago. Old oil money built Parker's Hollow, back when the land was coughing up black crude faster than they could lay pipe. It went up fast, a boomtown dream. Of pastel ranch houses and linoleum diners and 2 churches for every bar. For a while, it looked like it might last. But oil towns are like veins. Once they're tapped out, they go dry fast, and the people who ran things, the men with money, with suits and Cadillacs and Dallas lawyers on speed dial, packed up and vanished almost overnight, leaving behind the skeleton of what they'd built. No one tore Parker's Hollow down. It just sagged into itself. Time peeled the paint. Wind carried off the shingles. Weeds swallowed the road's whole. And somewhere in the bones of those houses, the phone started ringing. I first heard about it from a man named Carson, a trucker I met one night at the Alsups off 287. He was one of those old boys with a belly, like a beer keg, and skin gone to leather from too many summers hauling freight through the sun. He told me about it over burnt coffee and a pack of smokes. Said he'd heard the ringing himself back in '92, back when he took a wrong turn trying to find a shortcut down toward Electra. Said he'd pulled over in the hollow looking for place to piss, stepped out of his rig, and there it was, clear as church bells in winter, coming from every direction at once. Phones, real old ones. Rotary dials, the kind your grandma kept in the hallway on a little table with a doily under it. They cut the lines when they left, Carson said, squinting at me like he was daring me not to believe him. No power, no nothing. Towns, dead as bones, but those phones, they ring. I laughed it off at the time. Seemed like the kind of thing lonely people say to make themselves feel less alone, but something about it stuck. Went out there myself in next week. Took 277 north and turned off where the road turns to dirt. Kept driving till the GPS gave up and the signs rotted away. First thing you notice about Parker's Hollow is how quiet it is. Not peaceful quiet. Heavy quiet, like something holding its breath. No birds. No bugs. Just wind through dead grass and the creak of old boards shifting under their own weight. The houses are still there, more or less, collapsing in on themselves, porches tilting like sinking ships, curtains still hanging in some of the windows, brittle as old leaves. The church steeple's half fallen, the grocery store sign swinging slow and sad on one last rusted chain. I parked by what used to be the school. Got out. Stood there a while with the engine ticking cool and my heart doing this slow, uneasy shuffle in my chest. And then I heard it. Somewhere down the street, faint but clear. Rang. Not a cell phone chirp, not a digital tone. That old mechanical bell. Sound bright and sharp like it had teeth. Ring. I walked toward it slow, boots crunching gravel, shadows stretching long even though the sun was still high. Past a house with a porch swing hanging by one chain. Another with Help US. Spray painted on the door and letters gone soft at the edges with time. Past a mailbox still stuffed with yellowed flyers for vacuum sales and community barbecues that never happened. The ringing got louder. Ring. Came from a little blue house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Paint peeled in long strips like old sunburn. Windows dusty but unbroken. Porch sagging under the weight of years. The door wasn't locked. Inside smelled like rot and odd dust and something sweet gone bad. Furniture still there, laid out like somebody might come back any second to sit down and finish their cigarette. Family photos on the wall. Husband, wife, 2 kids with gap-toothed grins and hair too neat to be natural. The phone sat on a side table by the couch. Black rotary, the kind with a cord thick as your thumb. It rang again. Loud, sharp, like it had been waiting on me. I picked it up. No dial tone. No. Static. Just breathing. Slow. Wet, like lungs full of mud. I hung up fast. The phone rang again before. My hand left the receiver. I didn't answer that time. I left. Fast. Didn't look back till I was halfway down the road where the town disappears into scrub. Thought maybe I'd see someone watching from a window, but all I saw was the wind moving through empty houses. Later, back home, I tried to tell myself it was some prank, some leftover current running through lines nobody bothered to pull down, but the phones don't work like that. Lines cut at the pole don't carry power. No service, no ringing. I told Carson about it next time I saw him. He just nodded. They say if you answer enough times, they'll start talking to you. Real words, not just breathing. Things you don't want to know. I asked who they were. He lit a smoke with hands that shook more than I liked and said, "Folks who don't come back from there." I stayed away after that, mostly, but some nights, when the wind's right and my truck's pointed west, I'll swear I hear it again, faint, waiting, RR ring. Lantern Ridge was one of those places you drove past without noticing. A scatter of aging rooftops swallowed by mesquite and mezcal on the far edge of the Texas hill country, where the land rolls like tired shoulders and the wind always seems to whisper things you'd rather not understand. Most maps had stopped marking it years ago. Not because it didn't exist, it still did, in a way, but because no one had lived there since 1992, when the church caught fire in the middle of a Sunday sermon and burned so hot it melted the copper. Fell into a soft, sad puddle. The fire took 19 people with it. The rest left soon after. Not for lack of trying, mind you. Some held on a little longer, patched up their houses, boarded up the church ruins like you could just ignore that kind of thing. But by winter, even the stubborn ones packed up and left, leaving everything behind like they were afraid of what might follow if they stayed. The thing about Lantern Ridge wasn't that it died fast, it was how quiet it went, like it was never meant to last in the first place. The wind took over where the sermons left off. Cracked windows turned into hollow eyes. The silence became thick, like it had weight, like it was pressing down on the bones of every rotting house. And then people started seeing the lights. At first just one, flickering like a candle through the old Pickens place near the edge of the bluff. Later, more of them soft orange glows drifting between the houses like someone was walking with a lantern, always just out of sight. Some said it was kids playing tricks. Others said it was heat lightning or swamp gas, even though there weren't any swamps near the ridge. But the ones who'd lived there longest, the ones who remembered the fire, they didn't say anything. Just looked away when it was mentioned and muttered things like some things ain't meant to be lit again. It wasn't until late October last year that I went out there myself. I was doing a story for a low-budget paranormal podcast I ran out of. A rented trailer outside Austin, just me, a mic, and a head full of local legends. Dead Towns of Texas was supposed to be a Halloween special. I'd already covered the old mining camp in Terlingua and the drowned cemetery near Livingston. Lantern Ridge was the third stop on my list, mostly because the name sounded spooky, and I liked the idea of a church fire as a centerpiece. I wasn't expecting much. Just some overgrown ruins and maybe an old Bible I could use for B-roll shots. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not then. The road to Lantern Ridge doesn't even have a sign anymore. I had to follow a hand-drawn map emailed to me by an old woman named Martha who said her cousin died in that fire. The pavement turns to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that's barely a trail, and by the time I reached what was left of the town, the sun had already dipped behind the hills, turning everything to that deep blue that makes you feel like you're underwater. The first thing I saw was the church, or what was left of it. Just a blackened skeleton of timbers, the front steps still half standing, but everything else sunken inward like it had tried to fall into itself. The air smelled like old smoke and wet leaves, and even though it was October, the wind had a warmth to it, like something was breathing just beneath the soil. I parked beside what looked like an old general store, its roof caved in and a faded sign hanging by a single rusted nail. There were maybe a dozen homes scattered along the main road, all of them sagging and gray, their windows broken or boarded up, their doors left hanging open like mouths caught mid-sentence. I walked with my mic in one hand and a flashlight in the other, recording notes as I went. I described the state of the buildings, the layout of the town, the odd, unsettling stillness that clung to everything like a film of dust you couldn't wipe off. I was halfway down the main road when I saw the first light dot. It flickered in a window on the second floor of what might have been a boarding house, soft and orange, swaying like it was being carried. I froze. There was no sound, no footsteps. Just that light drifting slowly from one window to the next. I whispered into the mic that I was seeing one of the lanterns the locals had mentioned. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my heart had started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was probably some kid screwing around or a trick of the light, but there was no one else out there. I hadn't passed another car for over 40 miles. I hadn't seen another soul since I turned off the main highway. Then another light appeared a few houses down. This one moved between rooms, casting faint shadows across the cracked siding, but never revealing the person holding it. I aimed my flashlight at the window and shined it straight in. Nothing. Just an empty room, peeling wallpaper, a rocking chair tipped on its side. The lantern glow vanished. That's when I heard the singing. It was faint, high-pitched, like a child's voice humming a melody with no words. It came from the direction of the church. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. Another lantern had appeared on the front steps of the ruin, held aloft by nothing, just hanging there in the air, gently bobbing. The song grew louder. It wasn't one voice anymore. It was many. A whole choir of children singing that wordless tune, their voices rising and falling in time with the swaying of the lights. I backed away, nearly tripping over a root, and the singing stopped. The lights flickered. One by one, they turned toward me. I can't explain how I knew, but I felt it. They had noticed me. The lights began to move. Not fast, slow, and deliberate, drifting down from porches, through open doors, around the sides of houses, heading straight toward where I stood. I ran, dropped the mic, didn't care. I bolted back toward the car, nearly slamming into the general store. But when I reached the truck, the engine wouldn't start. Dead. Not a sound. I turned the key over and over, cursing, sweating, and then I saw them in the mere dozens of lanterns now, bobbing like buoys in a black sea, surrounding the car, pressing closer. Still no footsteps, no voices. Just light, moving where no hands should be, carried by something unseen. Then, a knock on the driver's side window. I jumped so hard I smacked my head on the ceiling. Outside the glass was a face. Barely a face. Really, pale, smudged with soot, the features melted like wax. The eyes were empty sockets, dark as oil, but I swear they were looking straight at me. Its mouth moved. I couldn't hear anything, but I could feel it, something cold and mean and endless, whispering into my skin. The lantern it held swung, gently side to side, casting my own face in and out of shadow. Then more of them appeared. Faces all around, pressing against the glass, their mouths moving in silent sync. And suddenly I knew what they were saying or trying to say. I didn't hear it with my ears, but it bloomed in my head like a brain tumor. Stay. The lights flared, bright, blinding. I screamed and threw open the door on the passenger side, rolling out and hitting the ground hard. I didn't stop. I ran like hell, back through the town, past the church, past the ruins and the houses and the lights, until the dirt turned to gravel and the gravel turned to pavement. I didn't look back. Not once. I hitched a ride the next morning with a rancher heading into Kerrville. He said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told him I'd seen too many. He didn't ask any more questions. I haven't gone back to Lantern Ridge. I never aired the episode. I didn't even go back for my gear. The mic, the recorder, the backup batteries still out there somewhere in that dead place. Sometimes I think about retrieving them, just to prove to myself it happened. But then I remember the faces, the mouths. The lights. The sheriff I tried reporting it to said the place was condemned after the fire and no one was supposed to be there. Told me if I'd seen lights, they were probably squatters, meth heads. I didn't argue. I just nodded and left. But I don't believe it. The lights weren't flashlights or campfires or chemical tricks. They were lanterns, old, glass-paneled things with soot-black chimneys and a flicker that looked too steady to be flame. I still see them in my dreams, moving through that dead town looking for something. Or someone. And I know this much. Some of the people who left Lantern Ridge never really left. They're still there, carrying the light, wandering the ruins of their homes, trying to finish a sermon that was never meant to end. And they want more. There's not much to say about Hollister, Texas, except that it used to be somewhere people passed through on their way to somewhere else. Used to have a gas station with a single busted pump, a diner that served the same 5 meals all week, and a little post office that stayed open mostly out of habit. Folks there didn't lock their doors, not because they trusted each other so much as there wasn't anything worth the trouble of stealing. Most houses sat half empty, old furniture covered in sheets, family portraits yellowed and curling on the walls. The only thing anyone took seriously was keeping their curtains closed tight after dark. If you ever found yourself on foot after sundown, and God help you if you did, you'd notice the same thing every time. Some face peeking out through a slit in the fabric, watching. Never blinking, never smiling. Just watching. I found myself there because of a wrong turn. That's all it ever takes. I'd been driving from Abilene to Houston, took the scenic route because I hate the interstate, ended up low on gas with no cell reception somewhere outside of Stanford. Saw a sign for Hollister nailed crook to a post, the letters peeling. Like sunburned skin. I figured I'd roll through, find a gas station, maybe a phone. I figured wrong. The sun was bleeding out behind the hills when I pulled into town. Empty streets. Empty sidewalks. Empty stores with for lease signs bleached pale in dusty windows. I rolled past houses with sagging porches and weeds tall as children creeping up the steps. Curtains drawn tight everywhere I looked. Not one light on. Not one person outside. My fuel gauge kissed the red line. I pulled up in front of the post office, a squat little brick building that looked abandoned until I stepped onto the porch and the door creaked open by itself. Inside smelled like mothballs and mold, old paper, and older secrets. A bell over the door jingled as it shut behind me. Nobody at the counter. Rows of metal P.O. boxes gaping open like empty mouths. I stood there a minute, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan overhead, feeling watched in, a way that prickled up my neck. I rang the bell on the counter. Once, twice. Third time brought a man out from the back, thin and pale like something that hadn't seen daylight in years. His name tag read Earl. His eyes didn't seem to focus right. "We don't get many visitors," he said, voice like wind through dead leaves. I asked about gas, about a phone. Earl just shook his head slow. "Station closed down years back. Ain't got a phone here neither. Folks keep to themselves mostly." I should have left right then. Should have turned my car around and trusted the fumes to carry me anywhere else. But I asked the dumb question anyway. "Is there a motel, at least?" Pearl smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "We got rooms out behind the diner. Old Miss Waller keeps the keys. She set you up." He gave me directions with lots of landmarks that didn't exist anymore. Left where the church burned down, right past where the hardware used to be. I found the place more by accident than anything. A squat cinder block building behind the shell of the diner. A neon sign that hadn't glowed in decades spelling out rooms. The office door was unlocked. Miss Waller sat behind the counter like she'd been waiting. White hair piled high, skin like wax paper, lipstick painted on too bright. She slid me a key without asking my name. "Room 3, she said. "Don't open the curtains after dark." Didn't say why. Didn't need to. The room smelled like mildew and old smoke. The bedspread held cigarette burns and patterns like constellations. The TV didn't work. Neither did the radio. I sat there a while, listening to the quiet press in, thick as wool. After a while, I got restless and stepped outside for a smoke. That's when I noticed the faces. Behind every curtain, a shape. Behind every shape, a face. Watching, not moving, just there. Like mannequins posed to look out at the night. I finished my cigarette fast and went back inside. Locked the door, even though nobody in Hollister seemed to bother. Propped a chair under the knob for good measure. Sleep didn't come easy. Somewhere around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, crunching gravel beneath boots. They paused in front of my door. A shadow moved across the gap under the frame. I held my breath, counted heartbeats. The footsteps moved on. Paused at the next door. Room 4. Same routine. Slow, careful, listening. Then on again. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I peeked through the curtain. Just a crack. Out they're in. The parking lot. A dozen people stood still as fence posts, faces turned up to my window. Pale in the moonlight, eyes wide and empty. Not blinking, not breathing, just looking. I shut the curtain fast, pressed my back to the wall. Didn't move until dawn painted the sky the color of rust. When I stepped outside, the lot was empty. The town looked the same as it had when I arrived, hollow, silent, forgotten. Earl was gone from the post office. Miss Waller's office. Locked up tight, no sign of anyone. I got in my car, hard hammering, and turned the key expecting nothing. The engine caught first try. The fuel gauge showed half a tank. I didn't question it, just drove. Didn't stop until I hit the main highway and cell service came back like a gasp of breath after drowning. I looked up Hollister later. Nothing on the maps. No listings. No history, like it had been scrubbed clean. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving back roads and the dark feels too heavy on my shoulders, I catch a glimpse of a sign in my headlights. Crooked on a post. Letters peeling .Hollister. And sometimes I wonder if I really got out. Or if they just let me think I did. Wexley isn't on any of the maps anymore, not the ones people trust. If you look hard enough, you might find it mentioned in some dusty old highway directory from the 60s, wedged between a cattle town that burned down in '74 and a ghost. Ranch the Oil Boys stripped clean before Y2K, but folks around these parts don't talk about Wexley. Not directly. If you ask about it in some bar in Abilene or Lubbock or down around San Angelo, the old-timers might go quiet, eyes fixing on their long necks like there's something floating at the bottom worth studying. They won't say much, just something, about bad air or cursed land. Or they'll say nothing at all and change the subject to football or Jesus. It's not the kind of place you stumble across by accident, either. No GPS coordinates, no signs. If you find it, you meant to. Or something meant for you to. I found it because of a woman named Darcy who used to come into my pawn shop just off the loop in Midland. Sweet old thing, smelled like menthols and lavender. Lotion always wore these heavy turquoise rings that clacked against the glass when she laid them down. She'd bring in odds and ends from estate sales, mostly junk. But one day, she brought in a map, not a road map. Hand-drawn, yellowed, curled at the edges like old bark peeling off a tree. X marked on it in red pencil, faint words scrawled next. To it, Wexley, do not enter. I asked her where she got it. Don't matter, she said, eyes already darting toward the door. Ain't no one supposed to go out that way. Place is wrong. Been wrong since before I was born. Curiosity's a hell of a thing. It'll chew at you if you let it. I let it. I closed up early the next Saturday, packed a cooler, some smokes, a flashlight, and the map. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Didn't figure I needed to. I followed that cracked stretch of 191 until the landmarks stopped making sense, until the sun started getting low and the horizon looked bruised and sickly. Then I turned off onto a dirt road that wasn't on any GPS. Just like the map said, the first sign that something wasn't right was the silence. Not the usual country silence either. No crickets, no birds, no wind through the scrub. Just this dense, heavy stillness, like sound itself had packed up and moved on. Then there were the signs. Hand-painted boards nailed to fence posts, rotting in the sun. Keep out, plague, death inside. You'd think that'd be enough for a sane man to turn around. I ain't never been that sane. Town limits came up sudden, no welcome sign. Just a rusted chain stretched across the road, a bent metal placard hanging. From it, words worn to nothing. Beyond it, Wexley sat quiet under a sky the color of old dishwater. The buildings were all still there, houses, a church with a steeple half collapsed, a general storefront sagging like bad teeth. Dust hung in the air, thick enough to taste. Every doorway marked with a chalk X, some big and bold, some faint and weathered like they'd been there decades. Windows boarded up. Lawns gone to dirt and weeds. I parked by what must have been. The town square, killed the engine, listened. Nothing. Not even my own heartbeat, it felt like. Just this oppressive pressure. Like standing at the bottom of a dry well. I walked not far. Just enough to see. Houses still had furniture inside, glimpsed through cracks in the boards. Toys on porches. Rusted trikes tipped on their sides. Cars. Left in driveways with doors hanging open, keys still dangling from ignitions. Like folks had walked away mid-thought and never come back. There were signs of struggle too. Scratches on doors. Claw marks almost. Smears of something dark and dried around the handles. In one yard, a trail of footprints led from the back. Porched to the edge of the fence and stopped. Just stopped. I lit a smoke with shaking hands, told myself it was just nerves. Told myself I'd snap a few photos, maybe write it off as a busted up old quarantine from the Dust Bowl days and call it a night. Then, I saw the dog, or what was left of it, lying half curled beneath a porch, ribs showing through patchy fur. Head twisted too far to one side like it had tried to listen to something underground and got stuck that way. Eyes open, watching me. Not glassy dead like you'd expect. Wet, alert. I didn't get closer. Didn't need to, because I started noticing more. Shapes behind curtains, movement in windows. Not fast, slow, deliberate, like whatever was in there wanted me to see it. Wanted me to know it was still waiting. And then the smell hit. Not rot. Not exactly. Something older. Deeper. Like earth dug up from where it wasn't supposed to be touched. Like hospitals from 100 years ago, sheets boiled and reused until they reeked of bleach and breath and blood. I turned to go, but the chain was gone. The car. Just dust and footprints behind me now. Mine and others. Barefoot. Too small to be grown men, leading back into town, into the dark between houses where the chalk marks seemed to glow faintly under the rising moon. I heard something then, not words, not a voice, breathing, heavy, wet, close enough I should have felt it. On my neck, I ran, don't remember how far. Don't remember when the landscape changed, when the road came back. When my truck was under me again with the engine screaming and the dust choking in behind. I just know I got out, but not clean, not whole. Because nights since, I see those marks. Chalk X's on the sidewalk outside my place, on my door frame. On my damn mirror some mornings when the steam fades from the glass. And I hear them breathing, closer every time. Wexley ain't on the maps anymore. But it's still their waiting. There's a stretch of Texas highway about 20 miles south of Tyler where the land dips down into a mess of swampy woods and mosquito-choked riverbeds. People don't stop there unless they have to. They keep their windows rolled up, watch. The trees creep past like green skeletons and hit the gas a little harder. If you look on a map, it barely registers, just a sliver of blacktop slung over the murky water, marked by a broken-down sign that says Stanton Bridge in peeling white paint. But the locals, the old ones at least, still know the stories. They know enough not to live there. They remember why nobody ever should have tried. The town of Stanton Bridge started the way a lot of bad places do, with men chasing money. There was a sawmill, a cotton gin, even a railroad that came through for a little while before the flood took out the tracks. Families settled close together, too close, building clapboard houses right up on the banks of the river like daring it to rise again. The soil there is black and soft and hungry. Roots crawl through it like veins. Things sink quick if you're not careful. That's how it started anyway. Somewhere between the floods and the fires and the sickness, Stanton Bridge fell out of the papers and into whispers. Folks moved off, except for the stubborn or the broke or the ones too mean to die. These days, what's left of Stanton Bridge squats beneath a canopy of trees that never stop dripping. The houses lean into each other like drunks, roofs slouching under the weight of rot and moss. Front porches sag over yards gone to mud and nettles. Windows watch the road with blind, dusty eyes. And at night, if you find yourself out there, which you shouldn't, not unless you're too lost or too stupid to turn around, you might hear it. Voices, soft at first, like someone talking low behind a door, then louder, clearer, like they're right beneath your feet, calling up through the boards, asking to be let in. Nobody lives in Stanton Bridge anymore. Not officially. But the lights still come on in some of the houses after dark. Pale blue squares behind curtains, no. One remembers hanging. Smoke drifts from chimneys whose hearths crumbled decades ago. And every so often, someone's dog will go missing, or a kid, or a whole car full of teenagers out looking for someplace to drink where the cops won't bother them. The sheriff's department knows better than to search too hard. They file it under runaways, lost hikers, stolen vehicles. Easier that way. Safer. I heard about it first from my Uncle Roy. He worked for the county doing pest control, the kind where you crawl under houses with a flashlight and hope the snakes aren't nesting. He told me how he'd gotten a call one August about an old woman who claimed something was living beneath her floorboards. Said it scratched at night and worse, it talked. Kept asking if it could come up. My uncle figured raccoons, maybe a coyote. Went out there with his truck and his traps. Said the place smelled like mildew and wet dirt, like all river towns do when they start sinking. Said the woman wouldn't let him in at first, just stared through the crack of the door with eyes like boiled eggs. Finally, she stepped aside, muttering about how he ought to be careful where he put his feet. He checked the crawl space. Dry as a bone, no sign of digging. But when he stood in her kitchen, the boards beneath him flexed like something was breathing down there. He felt it through his boots, soft and slow and steady. He didn't stick around. Told her to call an exterminator, not animal control, and left her standing there with her pale eyes and her cracked smile. Week later he heard she'd disappeared. Door wide open, no footprints in or out, just her old chair tipped over and something wet smeared across the threshold. They said she wandered off into the woods. Happens sometimes with folks her age. But Uncle Roy never went back, and he told me flat out if I ever got a call from Stanton Bridge to let it ring. I didn't listen. Not right away. Years later I got a job delivering propane, one of those routes nobody else wanted because it meant driving hours through nowhere to drop tanks off at campsites and hunting leases. One afternoon, the order came through for a refill out by Stanton Bridge. Some address. Bet barely showed on GPS, a name nobody recognized. My boss shrugged. Probably a new place, someone fixing up an old hunting cabin. Go drop it off, he said. Take the truck, be back before dark. He didn't say good luck. He didn't have to. I found the road easy enough. Hard to miss once you get past the strip of gas stations and feed stores and hit the part where the trees knit together overhead like ribs. The bridge itself is just a slab of concrete sinking into the river's edge, railings gone to rust and moss. Beyond it, the road dissolves into gravel and mud. Houses appear like tumors between the trees, hunched and blistered, shingles sliding off like dead skin. I passed a church with no roof, pews rotting beneath the open sky. A schoolhouse choked in vines. Finally found the address at the end of a rutted drive, a house leaning so far to one side I wondered how it hadn't fallen. No sign of anyone home. The tank sat out back, half buried in weeds. I wrestled the new one into place, checked the line. That's when I heard it. Not loud. Not right away. Just a voice, somewhere deep in the bones of the house, rising through the boards like smoke through cracks. Help me. Please. Let me up. I thought maybe it was the wind or my imagination. Then it came again. A little louder. A little closer. Help me. So cold down here. I should have left. I know that now. But something about it pulled at me like a hook behind my ribs. I stepped onto the porch, felt the board shift under my weight. Knocked once. No answer. Knocked again. The door swung open. No breeze. Just the house breathing slow and wet around me. Inside smelled like dirt and old meat. Floor sagging, walls blotched black with mold. A chair sat in the corner, rocking slow on its own. No sign of who'd ordered the propane. No sign of anyone, living or dead. But beneath my feet, louder now, the voice again. Please, so dark, so cold. Let me in. The floor flexed under my boots, boards bowing like something pressed against them from below. I backed out fast, nearly fell off the porch. Didn't stop to chain the tank, didn't stop to close the truck door. Drove until the trees thinned and the sky came back. I quit that job not long after. Moved west, out toward drier places. Sometimes, though, even now, I'll wake in the night to the sound of knocking beneath the floor, soft at first, then louder, asking to be let in. I don't answer, not anymore. But some nights I wonder if I already did. Grisby wasn't on most maps anymore. You had to know where to look. Even then, you had to want to find it, which wasn't something that happened much after '87. Before that, it had been just another nothing farm town out in the flat sprawl of north-central Texas, a name on a water tower and a handful of streets sunburned to powder, where wheat and corn were supposed to grow but usually didn't. Folks there worked hard, believed in God, waved from their trucks even if they didn't. Much like you. A church, a school, a post office where you could buy a money order and bullshit about the weather if you were lonely enough. That was Grisby, or it had been, before the dust turned black, before the sickness started, before the mirrors began showing things they shouldn't. Nobody knows exactly what poisoned the soil, not officially. There are theories, though. The plant out past County Road 41 had been leaking something for years. Everybody knew it. Though the company said it was safe, said it was just fertilizer runoff or harmless byproducts, nothing to get upset about. By the time the first calves were born wrong, 2 heads, too many legs, inside-out guts steaming in the dirt, it was too late to pack up and leave. Crops withered. Wells soured. Dogs ran off into the fields and didn't come back. The air tasted metallic, like pennies left too long in your mouth. People held on because that's what people like that do. They held on until their kids started waking up screaming about the people in the mirrors. Pale people, they said. Thin and twitching, mouths moving too fast, eyes wide and empty. Not reflections, not them. Something else thought there was a little girl, Marlene Yates, who cut her own throat in front of her bedroom mirror with a pair of rusted scissors. Her mother found her still twitching on the carpet, blood painting her reflection in smears across the glass. They said the mirror showed her sitting up afterward, whole and grinning, long after they'd zipped her into the black bag and carried her out. They said her mother smashed the mirror with a hammer, but when she came back later, there it was. Again, hung right where it had been, clean as a whistle. And Marlene's still in it, watching. Sheriff tried to burn that house down. Wouldn't catch. Walls blackened, smoke curled up and vanished, but come morning the place stood untouched, even the curtains unburned. Folks started leaving after that, the way people will when fear outweighs stubbornness. Packed up their kids, their Bibles, their photo albums and their guns, and drove until Grisby was nothing but memory in the rear view. Some of them died anyway, miles gone but coughing up black sludge that tasted like dirt and regret. By 91, it was a ghost town in every way that mattered. Houses empty, windows boarded, fields choked with weeds tall as a man's chest. Only thing that still worked was the gas station on the edge of town, and even that only because old Ernie Latham refused to leave. Said Grisby was his and he'd be damned if he'd let it go. People who passed through said he didn't look right anymore. Pale, thin, eyes like someone staring from the other side of glass. They said he talked to himself, or maybe not to himself, maybe to something standing just behind him, in the dark. Corners of the place where the mirrors hung dusty and cracked. That's where I come in. Reporter, once upon a time. Now just a guy chasing stories no one wants to hear. I heard about Grisby from a bartender in Amarillo who said his cousin's wife had driven through there on a dare. Said she looked into a mirror at the gas station, bathroom, and never came out again. Said her reflection's still in there, waiting. I didn't believe him, but I wrote it down. You learn to follow the weird ones. Sometimes the weird ones pay off. It took me a day to find Grisby. Roads got worse. The closer I got, cracked asphalt crumbling into dirt, mailboxes hanging open like mouths gone slack with age. I passed fields where nothing grew but dust, saw barns leaning like old men ready to fall. The welcome sign still stood, bent and bullet-pocked. Grisby, a good place to grow. I drove slow, feeling watched. Windows all empty. Houses leaning. Silent, not a bird in the sky. Not a sound but my own tires crunching gravel. I found the gas station easy enough. Pumps long dead, but the lights over the awning flickered weakly like a dying breath. I went inside. Bell over the door gave a hollow jingle. Place smelled of mildew and oil. Shelves half empty, candy bars fossilized with age. Behind the counter, a mirror hung crooked, spiderwebbed with cracks. My reflection looked thin, paler than it should have been. Behind me, shelves stretched on too far, deeper than the store itself. Shapes moved between them, too quick to catch. Ernie was there, or what was left of him, sitting behind the counter, staring into nothing, skin thin and yellow as old newspaper. He smiled when he saw me, teeth gray. Told you, he said, though I hadn't spoken. Told you they'd send someone sooner or later. Been waiting. I asked him what happened here, why the mirrors, why the town died. Not dead, he said, tapping a finger against the glass between us. Just moved over, like stepping through. Soil poisoned? Sure. Water too, but the mirrors? They're doors now, not for us. Not for long, for them. They don't like what's real. They like what's under it. He laughed then. Or maybe cried. Hard to tell. I left him there. I should have left the whole town behind. But curiosity's a sickness too, and mine's terminal. I went to the Yates house. Found it easy enough, still standing. Windows clean, curtains drawn, door unlocked. Dust thick but undisturbed. I found the mirror in the girl's room. Not broken. Not dusty, clean as bone. My reflection smiled before I did. Mouthed words I didn't speak. Behind it, shapes gathered. Hands pressed flat against the glass from the wrong side. Faces pale and twitching. I left then. Tried to. Anyway. Streets twisted, bent back on themselves. Houses moved when I wasn't looking. Windows watched. I found my car, tires rotted, engine dead though it had been fine an hour before. Ernie stood in the road, waving slow. Told you, he said again. They don't let go, not once you've looked. I'm writing this from a house on the edge of town. Don't know whose it was. Don't care, mirrors here too. Can't cover them all. They hum at night, soft like breath, like voices through water. My reflection moves when I don't, smiles wider, eyes blacker. I think it's learning me. I think soon it won't need me. Any more dot if you find this, burn it. Burn the town too, if you can. But I don't think you can. Fire doesn't catch here. Things don't rot right. Things don't leave. Grispy's still here, under the skin of things, waiting for someone else. To look too long, to step too close. Waiting in the glass behind the smiles. Behind the eyes, waiting. I first heard about Sundown Hill from a drunk in a bar off Highway 287, not far from Wichita Falls. One of those places with pool tables missing half their felt and jukeboxes that only play George Jones or Silence. I was nursing my third beer when the guy sitting next to me, old, jaundiced looking, with a beard like a dirty mop head, leaned in and said, like it was a secret he'd been dying to spill, "You ever hear of Sundown Hill?" I told him no. He laughed without humor and said, "Ain't surprised, not on no map anymore. Used to be a nice little neighborhood, real quaint, up a rise just outside town. Good people, good homes. Then one day they boarded it all up. Left. The furniture, left the dishes in the sink, even left pictures on the walls. Nailed shut every damn door and walked away. Won't find a single living soul who'll talk about why." He chuckled again, bitter and low. "Or if they do, they won't say it twice." He passed out not long after that, face first into his own ashtray, and I probably wouldn't have given it another thought if I hadn't driven past the turnoff sign a few days later. Faded, splintered wood, half buried in weeds, Sundown Hill Road. Curiosity is a rotten kind of hunger. You don't notice it's eating you until it's too late. The road was narrow, barely a lane and a half, climbing through scrub and thirsty trees that clutched at the sky with bare limbs. I passed no other cars, no mailboxes, no signs of life at all, until I crested the hill and saw the houses laid out beneath a thin haze of afternoon sun. 20 homes, maybe 30. Neat little rows of ranch style and 2 stories with peeling paint and cracked windows, but otherwise untouched by time. Lawns overgrown, sure, but the cars in the driveways still had plates. Swing sets in the yards. Garden hoses curled like dead. Snakes across dry grass. It didn't look abandoned so much as paused, frozen at the exact moment life stopped moving forward. I parked at the end of the cul-de-sac and walked. The silence pressed on my eardrums like altitude. No birds. No wind. Just the crunch of my boots on cracked asphalt and the distant, hollow hum of something electric buried deep underground. I tried a door at random. Solid wood, nailed shut from the outside with heavy iron spikes driven clean through the frame. The windows too were boarded, not haphazardly, but methodical. Every entrance sealed tight as a tomb, and it wasn't just. One house, every single one was the same. Front doors nailed shut, side doors nailed shut, garage doors nailed shut. Curtains still hanging in the windows behind the plywood. Faint shapes visible if you pressed your face close. Couches, tables, lamps. Lives interrupted. I circled back to my truck, unnerved but not yet scared. That came later. I noticed the photographs first. Taped to the insides of windows, behind the boards where the glass wasn't entirely covered. Faded Polaroids mostly. Family portraits, birthday parties, backyard cookouts. Smiling faces, arms thrown around shoulders, kids with cake on their cheeks. Normal stuff, except for the eyes. Every face had its eyes blacked out. Not scratched or burned, but carefully, precisely removed. Tiny holes punched clean through the paper where the eyes should be. Some photos were missing whole faces, heads snipped away with surgical precision, leaving behind necks and collars and empty air. I don't know why that chilled me worse than the rest. Maybe because it felt deliberate, not vandalism, not accident. A ritual almost. I should have left right then. Should have climbed back in my truck, driven down that cracked old road, and never looked back. But I saw movement. Just a flicker through the high window of what must have been the neighborhood church. A shadow crossing the light. The church stood apart from the houses, squatting at the far end of a gravel lot choked with weeds. Its steeple was crooked, leaning like a snapped neck, and its door was also nailed shut. But the boards here looked newer, fresher, less decay chewing at their edges. Circled to the back and found a window loose enough to pry open. The stink hit me first. Mildew, old wood, something sweeter underneath like rotted fruit. My flashlight cut a narrow cone through the dust and gloom, picking out pews stacked against the walls, hymnals scattered like leaves across the floor. At the front, the altar stood draped in moldy velvet, behind it a cross that had been turned upside down and nailed in place with thick iron spikes. Beneath the cross, something shifted. At first I thought it was just my reflection, caught in a cracked mirror leaning against the altar. Then it blinked. Not my eyes. Not human eyes at all. I stepped back fast, tripped over a hymn book, and went down hard. When I scrambled up, the mirror was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. Maybe there'd only been the thing crouched in the shadows, watching me with those two round, two bright eyes. I ran. Out the window, across the gravel, back to my truck. As I fumbled the key into the ignition, I looked up and realized the sun was gone. Not setting. Gone. The sky overhead wasn't dust-colored but black, black as a cave with no moon, no stars. The houses loomed in that darkness, their nailed doors gleaming faintly like teeth behind lips peeled wide in a silent scream. I drove. Fast, reckless, down roads I barely recognized until somehow the hill fell away behind me and the sky brightened by degrees and the highway opened up ahead. I don't tell people about Sundown Hill, not because I'm scared they won't believe me, because I'm scared someone will. Someone will hear and wonder and go looking the way I did. They won't find it on any map. I've tried. I've driven those back roads again, looking for the turnoff sign, and it's never there. Just trees and fields and the empty stretch of sky where a hill should be. But sometimes at night, I dream of houses with their doors nailed shut, of photographs with empty holes where faces used to be, and of something watching from the dark behind the glass. The realtor called it a fixer-upper, but David knew that was just polite sales talk for wrong. The house on Ashfield Road had been burned to the bones 3 times in 50 years, each time rising again like something that didn't know how to die properly. The latest version stood there in the August heat like it hated the very ground it was nailed to, warped boards leaning inward as though the walls themselves were conspiring, huddled together against the sky. Windows stared outward in directions that didn't make sense. One upstairs window pointed toward a blank stretch of dirt lot where no house had ever stood. Another seemed aimed straight at the neighbor's fence 3 feet away. The front door sagged like a drunk's mouth and the steps creaked under David's weight even though he hadn't stepped on them yet. He should have driven away the first time he saw it. Should have listened to the uneasy feeling tightening under his ribs, the one that said no house should look at you like this one did. But he didn't, because burnt-out things attracted other burnt-out things. And David was just another ghost of a man looking for a place to haunt. The neighbors didn't wave, didn't nod. Some pulled their kids inside when he pulled up with the U-Haul. The woman across the street, who seemed to live on her porch with a sweating glass of tea always in hand, muttered something he couldn't hear when he carried his mattress through the door. Maybe it was a prayer. Inside, the house smelled like old fire. Not smoke exactly, but something deeper. Charred wood beneath layers of cheap paint. Soot pressed into the grain of the floorboards like fingerprints left behind by the dead. Walls had been painted pale blue at some point, but the color looked sickly now, as if it had faded from shock. The ceiling sagged. The kitchen cabinets didn't close right. The doors hung slightly crooked in their frames, refusing to latch without a hard shove. He told himself it was just old construction. Poor craftsmanship. Nothing more. The first night, he couldn't sleep. Not because of the heat, though the air hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of something burned long ago and still smoldering somewhere beneath the foundation. Not because of the creaks and groans of an unfamiliar house settling into the dark. No, it was the smoke. He could smell it on the wind through the half-open window. He got up, walked through the rooms barefoot in the dark. The smoke smell got thicker as he went. He checked the stove, the outlets, the basement door. Nothing burning. No source. Just that thin, persistent thread of smoke weaving through the night. Whispering against his skin dot in the hallway, he saw the wallpaper peeling back from the corner like a tongue curling out of a mouth. Beneath it, the wall was black. Not mold, not rot. Burnt. Charcoal scars hidden under cheap patterns of faded flowers. He pressed his hand to it. Warm. He didn't sleep at all that night. By the second week, things got worse. He'd find footprints in the ash that wasn't there when he went to bed. Tiny ones, bare feet, crossing the living room and vanishing at the base of the stairs. He stopped cleaning them up. No point. They came back. The smoke got thicker, hung in curtains at certain times of day, always at dusk, always rising from corners where no vents existed. His throat burned. His eyes watered, but the neighbors never mentioned it. Never seemed to notice. One night, around 2 a.m, he woke to the sound of a door slamming. Not the front door. Upstairs. Somewhere near the room he wasn't using. The one where the window pointed at nothing. He went up with a flashlight, every step moaning underfoot. The door was closed. He didn't remember closing it. He opened it. Inside. The air shimmered with smoke. Not thick enough to choke, but enough to blur the edges of things. The window was open, even though he was sure he'd locked it. Outside, the night stretched on without end. No fence, no dirt lot. Just darkness. Thick and heavy, pressed up against the glass like something waiting to be let in. He closed the window. Shut the door. Didn't open it again. The dream started after that. Always the same. Fire eating the walls. Screams, not his own. A child's. A woman's. Shapes moving in the smoke, faces pressed to the glass with mouths wide open, black tongues licking at the air. He'd wake up sweating, throat raw, the smell of smoke clinging to his skin like hands. Neighbors still said nothing. The woman on the porch watched him with a look that hovered between pity and fear. Once, when he checked the mail, she called out, "You ought to leave while you still can." He asked her what she meant. She just shook her head. "Ain't the house." "Not anymore. It's the ground. Burnt too deep." He stopped talking to the neighbors after that. One afternoon, while tearing up old carpet in the hallway, he found scorch marks beneath the floorboards. Deep ones, not from this fire. Older. The wood crumbled in his fingers, blackened through layers that should have been untouched. Beneath that, more boards, charred. Beneath those, he didn't keep digging. He thought about leaving. Thought about it a lot. But each night, the house seemed to settle its weight deeper onto his chest. Made him slower, tireder, like it was leaning on him, pushing him down inch by inch. And he was tired already, wasn't he? Tired long before he bought this place. Maybe that's why he stayed. Burn out things. Drawn to each other. The last night, he heard footsteps above him. Heavy this time. Not the light patter of bare feet, but the slow, dragging thump of something too big for the space it moved through. Smoke rolled down the stairs ahead of it, thick. As fog, carrying shapes inside it that looked like fingers, like mouths. He didn't run. Running wasn't an option anymore. Not with the weight of the house pressing down, the walls leaning inward as if to watch. He sat on the bottom step waiting, listening to the footsteps come closer. When the door at the top of the stairs opened, there wasn't fire on the other side. Not exactly. Just a darkness that pulsed like breath, stitched with veins of light like molten metal. Shapes moved in it. Faces leaned out. The smell of burning filled his lungs until there wasn't room for air anymore. He didn't scream. Couldn't. Some. Mornings, neighbors still see smoke rising from the house on Ashfield. Just a little. Just enough to catch in your throat if the wind shifts. They say no one's lived there since the last man went missing. No fire reported. No body found. Just a locked house and a yard where nothing grows except black grass and the bones of dead birds. But if you stand close enough, if you press your ear to the leaning walls, you might hear a breathing and footsteps pacing slow circles in the dark upstairs. There's a stretch of Texas out past Sweetwater, somewhere between nothing and nowhere, where the cotton fields turn to dust and the land just sort of gives up on trying. If you drive long enough, heading west on roads that don't show up on modern maps, you'll come across it. Or maybe you won't. Some people swear it doesn't exist anymore if it ever really did. But I've been there. I've seen it with my own eyes. A place they used to call our ILHEAD, it was a railroad town once, or was supposed to be. The tracks were laid, the depot built, the homes thrown up in rows as neat and cheap as a drunk carpenter's. Teeth, only the last train never came. Some said the schedules got mixed up, others whispered something worse. Whatever the truth, the people who moved there, a few hundred at most, vanished. All of them. In the summer of 1952. Left their houses behind, their clothes, their dishes still in the sink, their cars in the drives. A whole little town, emptied like pulling the plug on a sink full of dirty water. No bodies were found. No notes left behind. It's like the earth opened up and swallowed them whole. I didn't believe in ghost towns until I found RAILHEAD. It was curiosity that took me there. Same as it takes most fools to places they ought to leave alone. I'd been driving aimlessly for days, trying to outrun a divorce and a drinking problem that wasn't quite bad enough to land me in rehab, but bad enough to make me hate myself most mornings. Somewhere around Abilene, I stopped checking road. Signs. Somewhere past Colorado City, I stopped seeing other cars. By the time I saw the rusted sign half sunk in a field of dead weeds, Railhead, established 1949. I figured I was too far gone to turn back. The first thing you notice is the quiet. Not peaceful, church on Sunday quiet, heavy quiet. Dead. Quiet, like something sitting on your chest. The houses are still there, leaning sideways with time, their roofs sagging like old men's backs, windows gaping like open mouths, yards overgrown with thorny scrub. There's no graffiti, no broken beer bottles, no cigarette butts, no signs of teenagers daring each other to spend the night, no signs of animals either. Not a bird in the sky, not a bug in the dirt, nothing. I parked in what used to be the town square, next to what looked like it might have been a general store once upon a time. Faded letters over the door read Miller's Dry Goods. The windows were caked with dust but unbroken. I pushed the door open on a groan of hinges and stepped inside. Everything was still there. Shelves stocked with canned peaches and old tins of coffee. A rack of newspapers near the door with headlines about Eisenhower. Prices marked in cents, not dollars. A register with the drawer hanging open, a few tarnished coins rattling inside. It looked like someone had just stepped out for a smoke break and never come back. That same uneasy weight settled deeper in my chest. I wandered the streets for hours. Found a schoolhouse with desks still lined up in neat rows, papers yellowing on the floor. Found a church with hymnals open to pages that fluttered in a breeze I couldn't feel. Houses full of furniture draped in sheets of dust. Photos on mantels, faces faded behind cracked glass. Toys left on porches. A doll's head staring at me. From a patch of dead grass by sunset, I told myself it was just another failed town. Dust Bowl leftovers, economic collapse, migration, whatever. Except none of that explained the feeling crawling under my skin like ants. None of that explained why my car wouldn't start when I tried to leave. It wasn't the battery, wasn't the gas. The engine just wouldn't turn over, like the town didn't want me going anywhere. That's when I noticed the tracks. They shouldn't have been there. Every history I'd read said the rail lines were never finished, pulled up before they could rust. But I followed them out past the town limits, through fields that cracked under my boots like old bone. The rails were there, all right, shiny steel stretching straight as a knife's edge into the dusk. And in the distance, far off where the horizon buckled and blurred, I saw a light, a headlamp, pale and steady. The shape of a train materializing. Out of the heat shimmer, something cold slid down my spine. I knew, somehow, that this was the train. The one that never arrived. I could have turned back. I could have waited by my dead car for morning, hitched a ride with whatever farmer might still roam these parts. I didn't. Curiosity again, or something worse. Something pulling me along those tracks like a fish on a line. The train wasn't right. Up close, it looked old, older than 1952 by decades. Black iron gone orange with rust, wheels shrieking on rails too smooth for their age. The windows were dark. The doors hung open, yawning gaps into deeper blackness. No conductor. No passengers. Just empty cars stretching into forever. I climbed aboard. Inside, it was colder than it should have been. Dust thick on the seats, cobwebs hanging from the luggage racks. And something else. A smell, faint but sharp, metal and rot and something sweeter underneath, like old perfume. I moved from car to car, calling out like an idiot. No answer but the echo of my own footsteps. Then I reached the last car. It wasn't like the others. Brighter, somehow, though there were no lights. Clean, polished wood, red velvet seats. And people. Sitting still as statues, heads bowed, hands folded in laps. Dressed in clothes from another century. Suits and hats, gloves and veils. Not moving, not breathing. Faces pale and waxy, eyes stitched shut with fine black thread. I walked between them, heart jackhammering. None of them reacted. None of them noticed me. At the far end, a man stood. He was tall, thin, dressed like a conductor in a uniform that might have been blue once but had faded to something like ash. His cap sat low over his face, shadow hiding everything but a wide grin full of small, sharp teeth. His hand rested on the brake lever, long fingers tapping slow and steady. "Last stop," he said, voice like gravel and smoke. "Been waiting on you. I don't remember getting off the train. Don't remember walking back to town. Just remember stumbling through streets darker than pitch, finding my car with the engine running smooth as butter, headlights cutting. A path out of railhead like a knife through fat. I drove until sunrise. Didn't stop for gas or food or breath until I saw signs for Midland and real people moving in the morning light. Told myself it had been a dream, a breakdown. A long night. After too many long days, but sometimes late at night I hear a whistle. Low and distant, cutting through the dark like a blade. I see a light out past the tree line, steady and pale, and I think about the people on that train, sitting quiet with their sewn-shut eyes. I wonder how long they've been waiting. Wonder how long I have left before they come looking. They don't talk about Devil's Fork much anymore, not around here. Folks who remember the place mostly keep their mouths shut, like even saying the name might call something back up from wherever it went. The cemetery's still there if you... Nowhere to look. A lopsided stretch of broken markers and sunken plots choked with weeds at the far end of a dirt road nobody's maintained since Carter was in office. The rest of the town ain't much more than rotted boards and leaning walls, but if you were to walk through it slow, if you were to really look, you'd notice something wrong right off. Curtains drawn back just a hair in houses with no power. Doors ajar like someone's expecting company. Mud tracked across porches where no one's lived for decades. They say the ground filled up sometime in the early 60s. The town's little. Graveyard wasn't big to start with, and death came faster than plots could be dug once that sickness rolled through. Some said it was flu, some said it was something worse, something brought up from the deep parts of the fork itself. Those black, sludgy waters twisting slow behind the hills. The town doctor went first, then the preacher, then children, then men too strong to ever lay down. When there wasn't room to bury anymore, they started putting the bodies wherever they could. Basements, sheds, wells capped with loose boards. And stones. Some just disappeared, swallowed up whole, gone between supper and dawn with no footprints leading anywhere. The last family out was the Haskells. Left behind their farm, 3 head of cattle, a rusted-out truck still loaded with what they couldn't carry. Folks said they'd been acting strange before they left. Windows nailed shut. Lanterns burning through the night. Muddy boot prints across every room, like someone kept walking circles while they slept. After that, Devil's Fork just stopped being. Roads washed out. Signs fell down. It's not on any map you'll find now, though if you ask the right old-timer at the right bar, they might give you directions. They won't go with you. They won't even get close. I went because I was stupid. Not brave, not curious, just stupid. Broke, desperate, and hungover enough to take a dare from a man with more beer in him than sense. I was told there was money to be found. Relics, antiques. Things left behind worth enough to make the danger worthwhile. I didn't believe in the stories, not then. Not until I saw what was waiting. The first thing that hit me when I got close wasn't the sight. It was the smell. Earth turned wet and sour, thick as breath in my mouth. Like rot, like standing water thick with things long. Dead. I thought it might have been something in the marshes nearby until I stepped past the broken sign half sunk in the mud. Devil's Fork. Pop. 312. The air changed then. Thickened. Got heavy in my lungs. Sound pulled back too, like the place swallowed. It up. My truck stalled not long after I passed the sign, and no amount of coaxing brought it back to life. I left it there on the shoulder, packed what I needed into a sack, and walked dot houses leaned at bad angles. Porches sagging under years of rain and wind, but windows still held curtains, and doors still hung on their hinges. Mailboxes open like mouths. Yards cluttered with rusted tools and children's toys soft with mold. Every so often, I'd see tracks in the mud. Bare feet, sometimes small, sometimes bigger than mine. Always leading up to a doorway or fading into nothing. The cemetery sat up on a rise behind what had once been the church, the steeple long since collapsed. I stood there a long time, looking down at the stones listing like teeth in a ruined jaw. Something moved between them, small, quick, I couldn't tell what. I told myself it was a raccoon, maybe a stray dog, but I didn't really believe it. I set up camp in what had been the general store. Roof mostly intact. Door still locked until I forced it. Shelves empty except for dust and rodent droppings. I cleared a space, laid out my bedroll, and tried not to think about how quiet it was. No bugs, no birds. Just the wind pushing dead leaves in slow circles. The first night, I heard footsteps dot slow, heavy, moving from one end of the building to the other, pausing now and then like someone trying to remember why they'd come in the first place. I held my breath until they stopped. In the morning, there were prints across the warped boards. Bare, muddy, leading from the door to the back room where empty shelves waited like open graves. The second night, I heard breathing, not my own. Not near me either, deep, wet, like lungs full of water struggling to remember how air works. It moved around the store, slow and steady, growing louder when it passed close to where I lay behind the counter. I kept still. I kept quiet. Morning came thin and gray, and the prints were back. More of them now, smaller feet trailing behind larger ones. Circles worn into the grime where something had stood a long while. Watching, maybe. I found the house on the third day. Big place at the end of the lane, porch sunk halfway into the to the mud, windows blacked out from inside with sheets nailed across the frames. The door hung open. Inside smelled of wet earth and something older. Something wrong. Mud tracked from room to room. Chairs pulled out like someone had only just stood up. Beds turned down, sheets damp and stained. I thought I saw someone once, standing in the doorway to what might have been a child's bedroom. Pale shape, hollow eyes. Gone when I blinked. I didn't stay long. That night, they came inside not all at once, slow, like testing the weight of things. First one set of footsteps, heavy and dragging. Then more, light, skittering, filling the dark with soft impacts and the sound of water, thickening in the seams. I lay still. I listened. I felt them pass near me, over me, cold as grave dirt. Something leaned close, breath on my neck like wind through reeds. Fingers, wet and thin, brushing my face. I didn't sleep. Morning didn't come, not properly. Just gray light thick as fog pressing through cracks. I packed my things and left, or tried to. The road wasn't there anymore. Not the way I'd come. Just more trees, more mud, more of those prints crisscrossing where grass should have grown. Houses I didn't remember seeing before. Windows open now. Doors yawning wide. Shapes inside moving just out of sight. Watching. Waiting. I ran. I don't remember falling. Just mud rising up to swallow my legs, arms, chest. Faces in the water. Beneath me, mouths open, eyes wide. Not angry. Not scared. Just there, waiting their turn. I clawed free somehow. Hauled myself onto solid ground slick with moss and rot. I don't know how long I wandered. Time bends there. Slips sideways. I found the cemetery again eventually. Found a new stone, fresh. My name on it. The date carved clean. I didn't make it out. Not really. I'm telling you this because sometimes at night, I still feel them moving through the house. tracking mud from the front door to the bed, sitting in empty chairs, breathing through walls that shouldn't hold breath. I clean, I lock up tight. But the prints come back, every morning, from nowhere, leading nowhere, just waiting. Devil's Fork is still there, and so am I. Crawford's End isn't on most maps anymore. Even folks who've lived in Texas all their lives will squint if you ask about it, like they're trying to remember if it was a place they passed through once on the way to somewhere better. That's how people treat it, like a smudge on the road they don't want to admit was there. It's about 20 miles south of Amarillo, where the grass thins out and the sky gets heavy with heat. You won't find a sign pointing you toward it, and if you drive too fast, you'll miss the turnoff altogether. That's how Crawford's End keeps itself alive. Quiet, forgotten, waiting. I didn't grow up there. Thank God. I just ended up there, like most people do when they've run out of money and options. I was 24, fresh out of a wreck. Marriage and a string of bad jobs, and my cousin Danny said he could get me work on a remodeling crew out that way. The pay wasn't great, but the house he set me up in was cheap. Dirt cheap. Too cheap, really, considering how desperate people can get for a roof. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have room for pride. First time I laid eyes on Crawford's. And it didn't seem like anything special. A handful of streets curling together like a dried-up spiderweb. Houses that hadn't seen a coat of paint since Reagan was president. Porches sagging under the weight of old furniture and older memories. People moved slow there, like the heat had baked something out of them. No smiles, no waves. Just stares that followed you from window to window, like they were waiting for you to understand something you hadn't been told yet. The house Danny set me up in sat at the dead end of Willow Street, past a patch of brittle. Trees and a drainage ditch choked with weeds. It was a squat little box of a place, peeling white siding, rust climbing up the gutters, a porch light that flickered even when it wasn't on. The first thing I noticed wasn't the house itself, but the air around it. Heavy, like you were breathing through wet cloth. Like something underneath was pushing up against the ground, trying to remind you it was still there. Inside, the house was hollow feeling. Rooms too big for the furniture. Corners that seemed deeper than they should be. But the basement door was what stuck with me. Center of the kitchen floor, a square of wood darker than the planks around it, padlocked with a chain so rusted it looked part of the floor itself. Danny just laughed when I asked, "You don't want to go down there, man. None of the basements here got floors no more. Just holes, real deep ones." I thought he was bullshitting me. Crawford's End had that small-town sense of humor, the kind where they test newcomers to see how gullible they are. But I noticed every house I worked on was the same. Basements sealed up, locked down, covered over with rugs or heavy furniture. Some homeowners even acted like they'd forgotten there was ever a basement at all. If you brought it up, they'd change the subject fast. I didn't sleep well. Not from fear at first, just from the way the house settled at night. Like it. Breathed differently after dark. Boards creaked, walls sighed, and sometimes, just past the edge of sleep, I'd swear I heard something moving beneath me. Not rats, not water pipes. Something slower. Something that dragged itself along. I blamed my imagination until the night I woke up to the sound of the basement chain rattling. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, like fingers testing the links, working them loose. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting my heartbeats against the sound. After maybe 10 minutes, it stopped. I told myself it was the house again, nothing more, settling, shifting. But in the morning, I found the chain pulled tight against the latch, stretched in a way it hadn't been before. Like something had been yanking on it from below. Work got harder after that. Couldn't focus. Hammered my thumb more times than I could count. Danny stopped joking with me, Started giving me the kind of looks folks give dogs that come home bloody. "You're hearing it now, ain't you?" he said one afternoon, sweat dripping off his nose onto a pile of splintered boards. "Told you not to ask about the basements. Told you not to listen too hard." I tried asking what he meant, but he wouldn't answer. Neither would anyone else. The old lady at the gas station pretended not to hear me. The guys at the bars stared into their drinks like they were afraid mine might answer. But that night, lying in the dark with the chain below me whispering against itself, I started to piece it together. Crawford's End wasn't built right. That's what Danny finally said, half drunk on a Friday, staring at his boots like they held the answer. "Too deep," he mumbled. "They dug too deep, back when they put this place up. Thought they could lay foundations in that dirt. Thought they could pour concrete over what was already here. Ain't no concrete holds forever, though, and when it cracks, well, things come up or pull you down." The chain snapped the next night, not loud, not dramatic, just a soft metallic pop like a bone giving out. I stood in the kitchen holding my breath, listening. The hatch door was open a crack, not pushed up. Pulled down. I don't remember grabbing the flashlight. Don't remember walking to the stairs. Just remember standing at the top, shining that weak beam into a hole blacker than night, steps disappearing into nothing. The air coming out wasn't just stale. It was moving, breathing, slow and deep and wet. I should have shut the door. Should have. Nailed it shut and burned the house down around it. But something about the dark pulled at me, like it knew my name, like it was waiting on me and only me. I started down, one foot after the other, flashlight trembling in my hand. The steps went farther than they should have, deeper than the house could have been built. The walls turned from concrete to dirt, dirt to stone, stone to something slick and pulsing under the light. Not rock, not flesh. Something between. The bottom wasn't a floor. Danny was right. It was a pit, a mouth. Open and waiting, rimmed with teeth-like roots, slick with something that glistened and moved. I felt it in my head before I heard it. Words too old to be words, scraping across my skull like nails through wood. Come down and be hollow with us. I ran. Tripped. Crawled. Hauled myself up those endless steps with hands that bled from splinters and stone. Slammed the hatch shut and buried it under every piece of furniture I could drag. But the house? The house breathed different after that. Closer. Louder. I don't think it liked me leaving. I left Crawford's End the next morning. Didn't pack. Didn't tell Danny. Just drove until the sun came up somewhere new. My hands still shake sometimes. My dreams still smell like that pit. I hear things in pipes, in walls, in the hum of appliances left running too long. Crawling, scraping, calling. I don't know if anyone lives in that house now. Don't know if anyone lives in Crawford's End at all. But if you find yourself there, if you rent a house too cheap for its bones, if you hear chains at night, don't go looking. Don't go listening. And for God's sake, don't open the door. There's a stretch of land west of San Angelo where nothing good grows. Folks call it Bitter Run, though it doesn't show up on any map that way. Some old cattleman gave it the name, probably, after watching the last of his stock lay down and bloat under the sun. You won't hear about Bitter Run in tourist brochures or welcome center pamphlets, but ask around a truck stop late at night, find yourself a man who's been driving these roads since before the oil boom busted, and he'll tell you, not in. So many words, maybe. They don't like to talk about it too loud. There's something wrong with the dirt out there, they'll say. Something wrong with the water. I found myself out there because my uncle died. Left me his house and a plot of scrubland worth less than the paper the deed was printed on. My mother warned me not to go. Said that house had bad bones and my uncle had worse. She remembered him from when she was little, before he got back from Vietnam with eyes like blown glass, marbles, and a habit of disappearing for days into the arroyos with a shotgun and a bottle. Mama said he'd come back talking about things. Under the ground. Said he'd nailed his closet doors shut and painted the windows black and wouldn't answer the phone. After sundown, I didn't believe any of that. Not really. A man dies alone in an old house, the stories pile up like dead leaves. I believed in debt though, and the inheritance paperwork said the land was paid off. I figured I could sell the house, maybe get enough to crawl out from under. My own mess back in Austin. First thing I noticed pulling up was how still it felt. Not quiet, still, like the whole place was holding its breath. House leaned against a sunburnt live oak, paint curling off in long gray strips. Roof sagged. Porch board soft as bread under my boots. A rusted pump well stood out back handle. Chained down, I gave it a try anyway, just to see. Dry as bone. Inside it smelled like damp plaster and something sweet left to rot. The kind of smell that gets into your clothes and rides home with you. The wallpaper hung loose in long yellowed sheets, curling up at the corners like it was trying to escape. Water stains spread like bruises across the ceilings. I ran my fingers along a windowsill and felt the wood give under the pressure, soft and swollen. The air felt wet. Not humid. Wet, like the house had been crying behind its walls. I didn't sleep there the first night. Got a room at a motel off the highway, where the sheets smelled faintly of bleach and the ice machine wheezed like a dying lung. Went back in the morning, told myself daylight would make it all seem smaller. Less strange, the closets were the worst. My uncle hadn't just nailed them shut. He'd padlocked them, wrapped them in chains like something out of a horror movie. I counted 6. Bedroom, hallway, even the linen cupboard by the bathroom. Heavy old locks, the kind you need bolt cutters. 4. No keys in the house. I asked the lawyer about it later, and he just shook his head. Said my uncle was a sick man near the end, talked about things living in the dark. Said he'd leave food by the doors some nights. Little bowls of water. My uncle died skinny and curled up in the bathtub like he'd been hiding from something. I cut the locks. Had to, if I was going to sell the place. Behind those doors, nothing. Just dark, mildewed spaces. Some with old clothes still hanging limp and shapeless on wire. Hangers. Others empty but for the stink of wet wood and something sour underneath it. I scrubbed the house top to bottom, painted the walls. Fixed the locks, aired out the rooms. The place stayed damp. No leaks I could find. Pipes bone dry. Still, every morning there'd be puddles along the baseboards, beads of moisture fattening. On the window glass, even though it hadn't rained in months, nights got strange. Not loud, not violent. Just wrong in the way dreams feel wrong when you try to explain them after waking. I'd hear knocking sometimes, soft as fingertips against the inside of a box. Always from the closets. Once from the cabinet under the sink. I'd open them and find nothing but that creeping wetness pooling on the shelves. Wallpaper peeled itself back overnight. I'd smooth it flat in the morning, press it firm, come back hours later to find it hanging loose again like old. Skin. I started seeing things from the corner of my eye. Shapes where there shouldn't be shapes. Pale slivers slipping between door frames. Something folding itself small in the gaps beneath furniture. The air smelled heavier by the day, like water left to sit too long in a dead pipe. I found my uncle's old notebooks one night, stuffed behind a panel in the attic crawl space. Pages swollen and stuck together, but I could make out enough. He wrote about the water, said it rose up from below. Not through pipes, through dirt, through wood, through bone. Said it listened at night. Said it knocked to see if you'd answer. Said it learned the shape of you through the walls. I didn't sleep much after that. Sat up with the lights on, watching the closet doors sweat through fresh coats of paint. I nailed them shut again, like he had. Didn't help. The knocking got louder. Sometimes it came from more than one place at once. Soft, polite, like someone asking to be let out. The well out back stayed dry. But one night I heard something moving. In it, not wind, not animals. Something soft and slow, dragging itself along the rusted metal. I watched from the porch as the chain on the pump pulled taut, links grinding against the handle like teeth. I didn't go near it. Not then. The ground around the house stayed cracked and dead. But the basement, which I hadn't dared go into until then, was slick with standing water. Inches deep. Black as oil. Smelled like old blood. I left footprints in it, though. None led down the stairs. I tried to mop it, bucket it out, but every morning it returned. Deeper down, I started dreaming of things behind the walls. Pale faces pressed against old plaster, mouths open in silent song, hands folding themselves flat between studs and beams. Waking up meant little puddles around my bed, little trails of moisture from the closets to where I lay. I called a preacher. Some backwoods Baptist with a cross tattooed on his neck and a smile like a broken fence. He walked the house with me, tapping the walls, sniffing the air like a hound. Said it wasn't demons. Said it wasn't ghosts either. Sighed sometimes places. Go bad. Said sometimes they learn how to rot in ways that look like haunting. Left me a Bible and a bottle of cheap whiskey. Told me to leave before it got its hooks in. I stayed. Stupid pride, I guess. Or fear of going back to Austin broke and beaten. Stayed through the nights when the knocking turned to pounding. Stayed when the closets began to weep through the walls, brown water leaking like veins split open. Stayed when I found my footprints traced out in moisture, leading from my bed to the locked doors and back again. The well chain snapped one night. Found it stretched across the yard like something had pulled free from deep beneath. Water in the basement rose to my knees. I saw faces in it, pale and soft, eyes wide like they'd never blinked. I heard them knocking in my head. Let us out. Let us out. Let us out. I packed a bag. Left at dawn. Didn't look back. The house is still there. Can't sell it. Can't even get a realtor to step inside. Neighbors, the few that live close enough to call themselves that, say it's sinking now. Roof halfway under, earth swallowing it slow. Some nights, when the wind's right, they say you can hear knocking from beneath the dirt. Soft, polite. Waiting for someone to answer. The town of Marrowbone was one of those places that didn't just fade away, it died. And not slowly, like the peeling paint on the storefronts or the cracked sidewalks choking on stubborn weeds. No, Marrowbone died overnight, in a way that left a scar so deep the land seemed to remember it like a fresh wound. You could drive past the skeletal remains of its streets and feel the quiet pressing against you, heavy and cold, like something waiting. They say the houses rot quietly beneath the mesquite trees now, their shutters hanging like broken eyelids and porches sagging like tired bones. But if you're dumb enough to spend the night there, if you listen close enough, you'll hear the footsteps, the pacing, the slow thuds of boots down empty hallways, dragging on the wood floor until dawn. I first heard about Marrowbone on a humid summer night in Denton, when the air was thick enough to drown in and the radio was tuned to. That old station that played nothing but regional stories and ghost tales. An old voice crackled through the static, telling about a town swallowed by silence, swallowed by something worse. My curiosity hooked me harder than I'd admit, and I found myself driving out there in my beat-up pickup just before dusk, headlights, cutting a path through the thick Texas mesquite. The last sign was faded almost to invisibility. Marrowbone, population 0. Beyond that, nothing but a dirt road and the creeping shadows of trees that swayed without wind. The sun was bleeding red behind the hills when I pulled up near what used to be the main street. The silence hit. Me first, a pressure that wrapped tight around my chest. Not the peaceful quiet of nature. This was wrong, thick, and full, like the air was waiting for something to happen. I walked through what was left of the town, stepping carefully over broken glass and rusted nails. There was a general store, or what was left of one wall's half. Collapsed, the sign swinging on a rusted chain, the faded painted letters peeling away. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath me as I stepped inside, though no one had lived there for decades. Dust hung in the air, thick and dry, and something else, something metallic and bitter that made my stomach twist. I moved on, drawn by the faint outline of houses lining the cracked street. Their windows were like empty eye sockets, staring out with dark holes that swallowed the last of the daylight. Porch swings hung crooked, creaking softly even though the breeze was dead. I could almost see the ghosts of lives lived children chasing each other through dusty yards. Old men sitting on porches and rocking chairs, the slow decay of an American town left behind by time. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing down the empty hallway of a house just a few doors down. I froze, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The sound was so clear it almost didn't belong here. The floorboards creaked beneath invisible feet, heavy boots dragging and shifting. The noise stopped, then started again, pacing back and forth like someone trapped in a cage. I wanted to turn and run, but something held me there, a stupid mix of fear and fascination that made my feet stick to the cracked sidewalk. The footsteps moved closer, growing louder, more confident, as if the house itself was alive with the restless weight of whatever had been left behind. I edged closer to the door, which hung slightly ajar, its paint flaking off in dry strips. The air inside was cooler, but it carried the same sharp metallic scent that had made my stomach churn in the store. I could almost see the long hallway stretching out inside, the walls lined with faded wallpaper peeling like dead skin. The footsteps circled inside, moving slower now, like the pacing of someone thinking, waiting, restless. Then the quiet settled again, thick and choking. I was about to step back when the door slammed shut behind me with a crack that shook my bones. The world dropped into darkness. I stumbled, arms flailing for something, anything. But the house was suffocating, swallowing me whole. The footsteps started again, this time inside the room, circling, pacing, closing in like a predator waiting to strike. I pressed my back against the wall, heart slamming against my ribs, sweat slicking my skin. The air grew colder, and the metallic smell turned to something fouler like blood and rust and rot mixed in a cauldron of despair. A voice whispered no, breathed right in my ear. It was ragged, broken, like it had been dragged through years of silence. You shouldn't be here. I scrambled for the door, but it was nailed shut. The wood splintered and rough beneath my fingers. The footsteps quickened, no longer slow, and hesitant but sharp and urgent, circling me tighter with each pass. Then came the faces. Shadows flickered on the walls, shifting shapes that looked like they belonged to people, ghosts maybe, or something worse. Eyes glowed faintly in the dark, watching, judging. Whispers joined the footsteps, voices overlapping in a maddening chorus of regret and pain and rage. I couldn't breathe. The room felt alive with death, a graveyard not for bodies but for souls. Marrowbone had died, yes, but it hadn't left. It lingered, bound to the rotting houses, to the broken streets, to the mesquite trees that twisted like claws under the moonlight. Somewhere deep in the darkness, I heard a slow, guttural laugh, empty and hollow, like the sound of a bone snapping in half. When dawn finally bled through the cracks in the boarded windows, the footsteps stopped. The voices faded. The cold lifted like a tide going out. I found the door, splintered and cracked, and pushed it open with shaking hands. Outside, the sun was weak and pale, washing the world in a gray light. I ran. I didn't stop until the mesquite. Trees were far behind me until the blackened skeleton of Marrowbone was nothing but a memory burned into the back of my mind. People say the town died overnight. Maybe it did. But death isn't always quiet, and it isn't always clean. Sometimes it claws and snarls and waits in the dark, pacing the halls of empty houses, dragging its feet until the dawn breaks and it can hide away again. If you ever find yourself near those old roads, near the rotting boards and cracked windows of a place forgotten, listen for the footsteps. They'll tell you the story better than I ever could. And if you're dumb enough to stay the night, you might just learn the price of curiosity in a town that refuses to die.